across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This
A very good morning to you. It's just gone 2 minutes past 6 o'clock. It's Saturday, March the 29th. It's me, James Max, with you here until 10 o'clock on Talk, in for Dr. David Bull, who I think he might be at some conference or other. Anyway, we've got plenty to talk to you about this morning. We're going to be joined very shortly in this studio by former Met Detective Peter Blakesley. We'll be going through the very big stories of the day. We'll be finding out about Reeves' cuts. Why are they unpopular? We'll be talking about the police who have arrested parents complaining in a school WhatsApp group. Find out why they're making April Fools of us and talk about Mr. Farage's latest pledges. Plus, we'll find out about embedded whiteness. Apparently, that's a thing. Talking of a thing, we'll also be finding out about leaves on the line. No, it's not leaves on the line that are causing problems. What has Network Rail now given excuses for? Plus, we'll find out about a big new chocolate trend. And I'll be asking you. Rachel Reeves' plan for the UK is almost as unpopular as Truss's budget. What's she done wrong? You can give me a call if you like. It's 0344 499 1000. Also, you can send me a text 87222. Start your text with the word talk, and you can tweet and X me at talkTV. And if that wasn't enough, we'll be talking about whether you've got any faith in the justice system. Two-tier sentencing is with us. We'll discuss that. Plus, we'll find out who's in the papers and why. So, very good morning to you this sunny Saturday morning. I have to say, the weather's doing its job. It's fantastic out there, good springtime weather, and I hope that you're going to join in the conversation this morning. Plenty to discuss with you. And indeed, as I said to you, I want to talk about Rachel Reeves' plan. I know that the statement was on Wednesday, and I know that these things, it's just like, oh, must we discuss it again? But I do think that the economy and how much money you have in your pocket kind of, it defines everything else that we do. I know that there are social issues. I understand that there are pressures up and down the country. I'm well aware that if we're in Birmingham, you've got bins stacked up, nobody's emptying them, and nobody's taking away the old rubbish, and there are rats infesting. I understand that there are issues with transportation networks, with roads and rail, and schools and hospitals and waiting lists and all these things that are all queuing up for us to have conversations about. And if that wasn't enough, this lovely weather, guess what that means? More people might arrive by small boat. We'll discuss that later too. But here on the front page of one of the papers, Reeves' plan for UK almost as unpopular as the Truss budget. Chancellor is now less popular than the Prime Minister and other key UK political figures with an approval rating. I do find these approval ratings very amusing. -32. -32. Well done. Half of the public opposed this week's spring statement, nearly as high as the 55% who rejected Liz Truss's disastrous 2022 mini-budget. But my question for you is, OK, so Rachel Reeves, her plan for the UK, almost as unpopular as the Truss budget. And you might say, well, 50% against it. Well, only 34% of people voted for Labour, so it's kind of not surprising. But in your opinion, what has she done wrong? 0344 499 1000. I'll give you a few thoughts as to what I think she's done wrong. First of all, she's talked about going for growth without giving any measures for growth. Secondly, she's endorsed Angela Rayner's nuts plan of building 1.5 million homes without actually thinking about who's going to do it, how it's going to be funded, and where they're going to go, or also the infrastructure that's required. I also think she's hit you. She's taken away the fuel benefits for pensioners. She has indicated that cuts are coming for those on disability benefits, without looking at, for example, like the Motability scheme. I mean, is 1 in 10 people in our country disabled and requiring some kind of motor transport on the taxpayer? Has she looked at that? Don't think so. And then what about national insurance, shoving that up? Charities, care homes, hospitals, hospitality, all requiring extra money to try and find in order to pay the extra tax. Setting aside any of the other measures, and one of them that I've actually written about today in the papers. And you might say didums to that, because if you're wealthy, well, she's coming after you. And then even when you see one of Labour's former most significant donors suddenly saying, actually, I'm going to leave the country because I don't like the new rules, you've got to wonder. Anyway, what has she done wrong? What's Rachel Reeves done wrong? Give me a call. It's 0344 499 1000. Have your say. And if you call me now, you will get through and we'll get you on air. And I know that sometimes people say, oh, but it takes ages. No, no, no. We'll try and get you on. So if you call and you want to have your say throughout the programme today, you are most welcome. Talking of most welcome, Peter Blexley, former Met detective. He's in the studio with me. Peter, good morning.
Good morning, James.
Good morning. I didn't get the time memo.
Well, standards, you see.
Oh.
I'm a bit old school in that regard.
Right.
If you're going on telly or on the radio or on YouTube, then I like to be presentable.
Oh, I say I like to be presentable too, but I don't. You see, I think the tie's gone out of fashion. You see, those who wear a tie, in my view, are subservient to those who don't.
Well, I would argue that most robustly, and we'll see how subservient I am in the next 2 hours.
Probably not very. Right, let's talk a little bit about the front pages before we get to some of the stories of the day. And I suppose one of the stories of the day is the front page of the Weekend. Reeves' plan for UK almost as unpopular as the Trust budget. I mean, yeah, she was never going to be popular given what she had to do. But what disappoints me is that if you've got a tough job to do, you try and make the right decision so at least people can see the future.
Yeah, but there's some cheer to be had out of all of this gloom and doom.
Oh, is there?
Oh, yes, undoubtedly. I've been watching left-wing commentators going into absolute meltdown in the last few days because Reeves is going after people on benefits. And, of course, it's a complete anathema and contrary to so much of what the Labour Party has stood for in recent decades. True.
And what I find so extraordinary is that people are complaining about her going after people on benefits. And when you look at the numbers of it that have increased since COVID or otherwise, where you see like 1 million extra people who are on benefits, I'm sure some of those are worthy cases where a benefit is required. But when you're talking about people who are younger, and we keep being told that we must have equality and equity in our workplace, that we must be encouraging people of all abilities, all ages, all conditions or otherwise, that they must be able to work and get on in society, which I think is a good message. And then suddenly you have people claiming benefits saying, oh, I can't possibly work, I'm disabled, my mental health, my this, that, my this. It's like, no. Come on, you're going to have to work.
Yes, but we also have another genre of people on benefits.
Oh, yeah.
That I think so many politicians actually fail to address. And it is those career benefit scroungers. And I'm not bothered about using that word, which is so hugely unpopular. And I'm going to add some context to it now.
Yes, please do.
There are people who actually think that benefits is a lifestyle. And they teach their children that benefits is a lifestyle. A teacher friend of mine was in the queue at the checkout at the supermarket the other week, and there was a woman with a child, and the conversation of school came up, and parents said to child, don't worry about school, you'll be on benefits. And that's a direct quote told anecdotally to me by a teacher who was aghast in the queue. And that's just one example. We
exactly,
know there are people that live on it.
Of course there are. And I think that's, I suppose, the reason why I'm asking about Rachel Reeves, and I'm asking why, how much, what's she done wrong, why has she made these choices, and I suppose the elements that we have to consider. Anyway, if you want to get involved in the conversation, what has Rachel Reeves done wrong? Give me a call. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number on that. Also to the Daily Mail front page, they're making April fools of us, they say. Labour's tax raids and soaring household bills to cost families £1,000 a year more from next week. I suppose I have a problem with this kind of analysis because they've done an average. And the thing is that for some people, it's far worse than that. So on average, people are going to have to find £1,000 a year. It rather depends on how much energy you use, how much water you use, where you live, all of these things. But how are people going to survive given the huge increase in costs of everyday things. If you go and buy a pint of milk, if you go and buy a block of butter, if you go and buy a piece of cheese, if you go and buy any kind of foodstuffs, it's all very expensive. If you go and buy half a dozen eggs or, a loaf of bread, all these things, and you can find them cheaply. And I know people sometimes say, James, you don't even know what a price of milk is, and where to get the cheapest. And I'll give you a range of prices if you want. I mean, it might be 70 or 80 or 90p in a supermarket, but you might be able to get 2 pints for 95p at an Aldi or a Lidl or wherever. I mean, there are variations of prices, but these things have gone up.
Everything is shockingly expensive. The compounded inflation of recent years means that weekly shopping trolley is unrecognisable from what it was.
Have you made choices to what you buy?
We're very fortunate, my wife and I, in so much as that we both work. We're doing all right. I mustn't grumble. I wouldn't describe myself as rich, but the Wolf is a very long way from my front door. But we live a fairly frugal kind of life in any event. We don't waste money. We're very careful with the budget. My wife keeps a very firm grip on the reins of the purse string.
So she stops you whipping down to the old betting shop?
Oh yeah, I mean things like that. I can't remember when I've had a bet.
What about a cheeky takeaway?
Yes, of course, yeah. I mean, that is a treat.
You love a cheeky takeaway.
I most certainly do.
And when you go for a cheeky takeaway, where does it end up? Are we talking about the local Indian, Chinese, fish and chips?
How long have you got? Kebab, Chinese.
Is kebab first?
Curry.
I didn't see you as a kebab man.
Oh, yeah.
Is that after half a dozen pints?
Shish and doner mix, yeah.
Really?
Oh, I could do one entirely sober for a kebab.
Right, wow.
I'm not a fan. All the salad.
That's a revelation for you.
All the salad,
Who
chips,
knew?
chili sauce. Thank you very much. Yeah. So kebab, a Chinese.
Do you put the chips into the kebab?
Well, it depends how much chili sauce has been ladled upon it.
Yeah.
If I've got enough, then of course I do like a chip.
A bit of hot stuff for you.
With a little dab on the end of it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Back to my list.
Yeah.
Right. For the fourth time. Kebab, Chinese.
Yes.
Curry.
Yes.
Fish and chips.
Right.
And I love all of them.
All of them.
But we will have one once a fortnight, generally speaking.
Because I think that's the other thing. And the reason I ask, and it might sound frivolous, but sometimes when I look at our society, I say, well, if you're having to cut back, when I was growing up, a takeaway was really a special treat. It was something that we did, once in a school holiday. It wasn't a regular thing. Whereas now it is a regular thing. You see the food apps, and then you hear about the youngsters who are desperately trying to get onto the housing ladder, and I understand how difficult that is. And then the outrage that there was when somebody had the temerity to say, well, how are you spending your money? Because if you really want to buy a house, if you really cut back, there are a whole load of things that you do today that aren't necessary. And if you cook for yourself, if you did these things, if you didn't go out quite in the same way, you might be able to afford it quicker. I don't think that answers the problem and the question that is definitely there. But there is a very different way that different generations spend their money.
And it doesn't answer the question as to when my wife and I bought our first house together, I think our mortgage was 3 times combined salaries.
Yes.
If you take a young couple now on an average wage, for example, 3 times their salaries wouldn't get anywhere near buying a property.
And that was part of the problem with all of this, is that after the financial crash in 2008, the government stuck stupid rules on how many times people's salary they could borrow, on the basis that we were all living longer, we were all having to work longer, and yet the mortgage market never adjusted. It was still saying, well, you've got a 15-year term, a 20-year term, maybe a 25-year term, that's it. And then they weren't able to stretch out that debt, and one thing has compounded and made it unaffordable, combined with the fact that we've stuck stamp duty on everything, stamp duty at the top end, 17%. I mean, it's kind of if you put a 17% tax on something, the price is going to go up. And it is going to be inflationary. And I don't think people have understood all of these different measures that this government and the previous government have done. Where I understand that they need more money to do all these things, but they've salami sliced here and there. Don't expect money flows, to its lowest level like water.
Yeah, and of course, in answer to your question, which you put out to the audience just a few minutes ago, about what has Reeves done wrong, yet again, if I may go back to those who see a life on benefits as a career choice and sadly there's a lot of people that do, Reeves has not gone far enough in tackling that very issue. I think it was Churchill that said the social security system should be a net beneath which nobody can fall and above which everybody can rise. And I think that's as right and as apposite today. But unfortunately, too many people, the reckless, the feckless, those who open their legs without thinking about the consequences of it, that bring into the world benefits babies, and there are babies born into this country to live on benefits. Those kind of people need to be tackled.
How do we tackle that?
School, of course, inside the school gate, outside the school gate.
Because one of the things about school which I find so extraordinary is that it's almost seen as an optional extra by some. It should be, I mean, the parent who takes their child out of school during term time because holidays are expensive in the holidays, inevitably, demand goes up, prices go up. Well, diddums, if you can't afford it, you can't go. Your child's education is your most important responsibility. If you as parents want to go away and can leave the children with the grandparents for a week and you go away, fine, I get it, go off and organise your lives. But if you are telling me that you can justify taking your child out, that should be, you lose your free housing, you lose your benefits, you lose your free schooling, you lose everything. It shouldn't just be here's £100 fine, because people go, well, it cost me more than £100 to go away on the holiday. I mean, it's just like, no, 100%. Unless your child is ill, that child must be in school.
Teachers cannot educate absent children.
Correct.
So, of course, they need to be there. It's
and children who are
vital.
absent, and people say, oh, well, my child not being there, it should be by special dispensation. Is there an excuse for a child to be away from school? A relative who lives overseas has passed away and they need to go to the funeral. I get that. Not necessarily necessary, but it depends. If it's a close relative, I get it. And I'm just trying to think of another excuse or another reason why I would allow a child to leave school. I mean, family holiday? No.
Yeah, and of course, the blatantly obvious, the poorly child. But you see, these matters need to be tackled, and to a certain extent, social workers need to do their job. This cuts across so much of what we might talk about later on this morning, when politicians talk about addressing wastage in the civil service. We need to look at other departments as well, other government and local authority organisations where there is a plague of laziness and a lack of discipline, and managers who are afraid to manage because they fear they're going to end up at some form of tribunal accused of bullying. We have lost discipline in the workplace and in society, and consequently certain people go into jobs thinking, what can I get out of this? Not
exactly.
What can I bring to the role? What can I be proud about at the end of the month when I get paid? No, what can I take from this?
Exactly.
And it's a rot.
And that's why I'm asking the question. Rachel Reeves' plan for the UK economy is almost as unpopular as Liz Truss's budget. What has she done wrong? 0344 499 1000. Let's just pick up some messages, Peter. Sean in Gloucester says, James, good to see you back. Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Simple answer. Rachel from accounts has not got anything right at all. She's incompetent, so far out of her depth. How idiotic do you have to be to think by taking money off people you're going to get growth? George says, hi, James. Jacob here. Great show. Thank you. Fundamental problem with Rachel Reeves is that she is incompetent. You don't need a degree in economics to understand that if you apply VAT to private schools, it will cause pressure on the state school system. If you take away heating allowance from pensioners, you lose any goodwill you have, not just from pensioners but from their families. If you tax farmers unfairly, you bite the hand that feeds you. Everything she's done has been anti-growth. She's plainly incompetent, and looking through her CV has failed upwards throughout her career. Meanwhile, somebody says that you're right. When I worked as a doctor in Liverpool, I asked a young man what his occupation was as part of his clinical history taking. His father interjected and said, don't you ever ask my son this question again. He's third generation unemployed and proud of it.
Yeah, well, there you go.
There you go. The main thing I've learnt is that it's disastrous to disturb an economy and people's lifestyles dramatically and suddenly, says Celia. How can the government, says Zoe in Lancashire, how can the government find out who needs PIP and who doesn't? Because it's looking like Reeves wants to kick everyone off PIP, regardless of whether they're genuine or not. She needs money for migrants. We'll come on to that.
Yes, I've done
oh no,
some
Keith in the
mathematics as well.
Philippines has told me off.
Oh, what have you done?
I don't know. He says, Keith says, James, you were rather rude to Peter. He looks like he respects viewers. You looked like you were late to work and didn't have time to put a tie on. You might think it looks fashionable, but actually looks scruffy. I thought it looked quite smart today. I don't know.
Thank you, Keith.
Oh, Dave, the producer, just was shaking his head like a Churchill dog out the back. Unbelievable. I very rarely wear a tie. 20 years ago, I went onto a reality TV programme, and I was one of the few people who didn't wear a tie because I'd worked for an organisation that had ditched them. I worked for an American investment bank, and they said, don't need to wear ties, except in special occasions. So on special occasions, I wore a tie, and otherwise I didn't.
I like ties. I've got a selection of ties, which I'm very fond of.
To be fair.
And I think if you're going to appear on the television, on YouTube, on the radio, whatever format it might be, if people have the opportunity...
Come on, they're not going to present the
you,
one show in a tie.
Well, if I was a guest on the one show, I would wear a tie.
Well, yeah, but
that's a matter for me.
Yeah, but you're Peter Blexley.
And I've got standards.
Wow. Okay. Sharon says, James, it's good to see you this morning. It's good to see you too. And Peter. Oh, Sharon's excited. Thank you. It's one of the best things Labour has done by going after people on benefits. Why the hell should taxpayers be paying for these lazy so-and-so? They'll stay in bed all day whilst we have to get out of bed, go to work. Well done, Reeves. You need to now let them out of bed and earn to get their benefits. I mean, earning benefits. I mean, here's one thing. So I was watching Michael Portillo on his latest, greatest train adventure around continental Europe, paid for by you and me through the British Broadcasting Corporation. It's quite a good programme, if you like that sort of thing. This week, he's been going through Switzerland. I just noticed how amazing their infrastructure is. We always talk about Swiss trains and punctuality, but their trains are amazing. The technology is incredible. The pride in the system is absolutely up there. Not a speck of rubbish anywhere to be seen. You go around our cities, our towns, our villages. The rubbish is out of control, and partly I blame us for not having it picked up, and partly I blame a society that thinks it's acceptable to throw it in the first place.
I come back to the D word, discipline. So people are scared of that word, and of course I was fortunate enough to be away for just under 3 weeks making a TV show in Botswana.
Were you?
In
Who was
Southern
that
Africa for the Botswana government. They were the ultimate client.
I was hoping it was going to up on the British
No. And there was much about Botswana society to commend and to enjoy. And then I flew back in the following morning, which was yesterday. I'm back on the trains and I'm back on the tube.
It's embarrassing, isn't it?
It was absolutely revolting.
And so what I would be doing is I would be saying, right, OK, you want to claim the benefits until you get a job. This is what you're doing. Well, picking up the mess. Anyway, we will come back to you, Peter, in just a few moments' time, and we'll do the rest of the front pages. That's all coming. Oh, and did I say we'd take some of your calls? Yes, we will. Rachel Reeves' plan for the UK is almost as unpopular as the Truss budget. What has Rachel Reeves done wrong? Give me a call. It's 0344 499 1000. We take your calls and your messages and more from Peter. That's next on Talk.
British people, Australian people. The staff have said this is the first earthquake, the first big earthquake they've ever had. Apparently there was one 20 years ago, but they're still searching for some people who were staying in the hotel. Someone over there is missing his brother at the moment, so they're trying to work out who's here, who's not here. We don't know if we're going to be allowed back in the hotel anytime soon. And also, no news on planes coming in or leaving Bangkok.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
28 minutes past 6 o'clock. It's me, James Max, with you till 10 on Talk with your weekend breakfast show this Saturday morning. All sorts coming in on the old socials, and if you want to give me a call, it's 0344 499 1000. Asking about Rachel Reeves' plan for the UK, almost as unpopular as the Trust budget, but what's she done wrong? Lenny in Ashford has said, James, I believe Rachel Reeves, she's forgotten you can only spend £1 once, so waste is the biggest danger. What's this? Shannara has given some views on tie wearing. Shannara says, people who wear ties are slaves to conformity. Don't let them choke you out of your free thinking and creativity.
Well, if she stays tuned to this show for another couple of hours, she'll realise that there are no constraints on my free thinking and my creativity just because I choose to wear a tie.
Okay.
But everyone's entitled to their views.
Thomas is very pleased that I'm back, and he says, "Please come back for good." Thomas, it's not in my remit to be able to define. I don't just sort of like turn up and demand to go on air. You know, you have to be invited.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay, let's talk about this story. So, front page of the Telegraph focuses on Mark Carney accused of plagiarism. They've got an interview with the net zero czar. I can see why people are angry, she says. But then, of course, you know, well, I mean, I don't know. When I was growing up, Peter, and you'll reflect well on this, and I'm just wondering if I need to adapt my attitude. When I was growing up, older people always said to me, you know you're old when you look at the police officer in your area and they look young to you. I'm looking at this climate change czar, and she's looking very young to me, and I'm thinking, well, what experience can a 38-year-old have, and why has this individual suddenly got all the experience that they're able to deal with something as serious as net zero or otherwise to tell us how to live our lives? And it's no wonder we're in such a mess if we're turning to such people to advise us. That's me just being ageist, though, isn't it?
Yeah, when I was 38, I've been in the police for over 20 years and I had a lot of experience. I had a lot of life experience. I'd seen all the devils and their handiwork.
Yes.
I'd seen so much of society, from paupers to princes and the such like, and I had a lot of experience. If you're good enough, you're old enough.
Okay. Right. Meanwhile, let's get your experience on this, because this is something that I think will probably... and I guess, look, if you want to join the conversation, by the way, yes, talking about Rachel Reeves, you're welcome, but also if you want to talk about this next story, talking about our justice system and whether you have any faith in it, feel free. 0344 499 1000, of course, is the number. Judges has defied Keir Starmer by refusing to scrap two-tier rules that take account of a criminal's ethnicity before sentencing. I find this absolutely astonishing. Is it right or wrong of me to consider somebody's ethnicity when it comes to sentencing?
OK, the Sentencing Council, and it's basically that organisation which is at the centre of this ongoing row. Anybody who's got a bit of time to spare, just stick it into your search engine, Sentencing Council, and you'll see the list of everybody's names come up, and there's a photo and there's a biog of them, and
right. Should I do this whilst we're chatting?
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Yeah, all right.
to.
Well, I'll have a see. Let's see if I can see.
And what you will see,
because I've never looked for this before,
Right.
and this is one of those things where you have an organisation and you think, well, who's paying for all of this? You are.
Yeah. And sitting on the Sentencing Council are completely and utterly devoted establishment people. There's nobody from the street on there. There's nobody from the kind of working lives of all of my friends, for example. There's just a bunch of establishment forelock tuggers who have clearly squirmed their way on to this council. It is utterly unrepresentative of people who have concerns about criminals and the criminal justice system, and therefore I think it's fundamentally not fit for purpose. And of course, it is this lunatic body that came up with these absolutely perverse guidelines about taking into account features which really are irrelevant and could be deemed as being unbalanced, unfair, and two-tier, as so many people have called it.
Two-tier. The council comprises 8 members of the judiciary, 6 non-judicial members, all with the expertise in the criminal justice system.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and then go on and read their bios. Okay, I've done it. I've wasted my time doing it so that viewers and listeners don't have to. Although, if you want to see just how unrepresentative it is, it is. They've got one police officer on there, and of course, he's a chief constable, soon to be retired, if he hasn't already walked out of the door with his gilt-edged pension already. Yeah, it's just an utter
and you see,
nonsense.
this is the thing, is that we say, so judges having defied Keir Starmer, refusing to scrap the two-tier rules. The Sentencing Council has rejected government demands to drop plans that require judges to consider offenders' racial, cultural and religious background when deciding whether to impose jail or community sentence. I'm sorry, in my view, I don't care what religion you are, what sex you are, what age you are, anything else. When it comes to sentencing, we need to be really clear about sentencing, and to have racial profiling in any shape or form, to me, seems utterly wrong.
The statue on top of the Old Bailey, the most famous criminal court in the world, is Lady Justice. She used to be blindfolded, okay, but they removed the blindfold some years ago. And that blindfold that was on this famous statue, which of course has the scales in one hand to represent balance and a sword in the other to represent the might of the criminal justice system, had a blindfold because justice should be blind to matters such as race, upbringing and those kind of things. But of course, now, to the Sentencing Council, it very much isn't, and these things should create some form of inbuilt bias, because that's what it is.
I mean,
It's
interestingly, this is one of the few moments in which the government is actually against this. So Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, said she was extremely disappointed by the Council's response and said she was prepared to take new powers either to overrule or strip it of the ability to issue such guidelines.
Disband it. How about that for starters? Save a load of money.
I mean, that's what Trump would do. If he would just say, you know what, we're going to save some money. You lot, you're gone.
Executive order, boom, out the door,
out the door. So, if you want to get involved in the conversation, do you think that we have two-tier justice? How much faith do you have in the justice system? 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number on that one. And meanwhile, we'll talk about some more of the front pages in just a few moments' time here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:38 is the time. Peter Blexley is here, former Met detective. He and I are having a right old gossip. Anyway, we've got a job to do, Peter, so we need to get back to those front pages. The Sun talks about, it has a sporting story. Erling Haaland, he left a Manchester City mascot with a suspected whiplash and concussion after a playful knock to the back of the head. Doesn't sound ideal. That's apparently front page news. Daily Star talks about the story, which I'm surprised is not on more front pages, but it's on the front page there. Hell on earth. They say tens of thousands are feared dead in quake. This is the earthquake in Myanmar. Hundreds of people feared to have been killed after a devastating earthquake struck Southeast Asia. A massive 7.7 magnitude quake was registered on Myanmar and caused havoc in tourist hotspot Thailand. And indeed, our colleague Steve Denyer from the Virgin Radio, he was in Bangkok at the time and has posted a video of him, up at top of a building, and it's all shaking and moving around. I mean, astonishing. Yeah. Daily Mirror focuses on TV fave Paul O'Grady's husband shares poignant film from 20 minutes before the star's death. I mean, it's an extraordinary little video. Very sad, obviously. He's commemorating 2 years since he passed away. Meanwhile, a story on the front page of the Times. Police arrest parents for complaining about school. So this is a gentleman by the name of Maxie Allen and his wife Rosalind Levine. So both of them I've worked with. Maxie used to be, he's a producer now at Times Radio, our sister station, but also used to be a producer at The Dark Side when I was there. Used to produce a certain gentleman who perhaps veers off to the left mid-mornings.
Yes, of course.
Anyway, police have been accused of heavy-handed Kafkaesque approach after sending 6 uniformed officers to arrest 2 parents who complained about their school. I do find this absolutely astonishing. I mean, should policing be used for this? I mean, if people have complained or, there are ways to deal with it, but not like this, surely.
This is utter nonsense, this story. Absolutely appalling, and it goes to show how far our police have fallen in terms of the respect they used to command from the public. Not all of the public, of course, but just how detached they have become.
So just to give a little more detail on the story. So Maxie Allen and Rosalind Levine, they were put in a cell, according to the story here, for 8 hours, questioned on suspicion of harassment and malicious communications after sending numerous emails to the Cowley Hill Primary School and criticising leadership on a WhatsApp group. The school referred the matter to the Hertfordshire Constabulary after complaining about a high volume of emails and that the couple were casting aspersions on social media.
Yeah.
Now, look, the school may have its view, but surely there must be a better way to sort this out.
Well, there's a couple of really big policing issues within this for me, as I see it, as speaking as a former police officer. First and foremost, Sir Robert Peel, when he laid down his 9 principles of policing nearly 200 years ago when he set up the Met Police, laid down those principles, and I would urge anybody to go online and read them. Just Google Robert Peel's principles of policing and you will see that they are as apt, as relevant, as apposite to society today as they were when he first wrote them. The trouble is, police services, the length and breadth of the country, have completely forgotten them. They've trashed them, they've ignored them.
So what's the most important one? I mean, you would probably say that all of them are important, but what was the most important?
In regards to this case, that the police are the public and the public are the police. Because clearly this is not policing how the public would want it, how it should be done, and the other most...
Because doesn't this scream to me, if you have a situation where parents are criticising a school, they might be right, they might be wrong, but that means that the school doesn't have an adequate process to deal with a parent's complaint. To either say, we hear your complaint, I'm sorry, it is rejected, and therefore that's an independent council, it's the governors, it's whatever it is, or alternatively, that they listen to it and they go, actually, you have a point, we must take action. So either way, it should be a process which every single school, certainly when I was at school, you know, you had governors, and if something was serious, it went to the governors and they opined.
Mr. Allen used to be a governor at this school. So it just goes to show how far that relationship broke down, and clearly it's about a failure of communicating.
You would have
perhaps
thought.
on behalf of both parties.
And when
But
you've got...
it's not a police matter.
And this is the other thing, is that, so, I mean, setting aside, you know, I mean, they... I mean, I think Mr. Allen has put up on the social media when the police arrived, and you see them all arriving. Yeah. I mean, one police officer, you know, if you've got to send one, you don't need to send, you know, 6 or 8. It's like, what the hell's going on? It's like, you've got shops up and down the high street that are having stuff regularly taken from them every single day. Pillaged. You've got society where everybody knows if you want to get a banned and controlled substance, where to get it from.
Yep.
You've got people littering, you've got people sleeping rough, you've got people stealing, taking mobile phones, driving illegally. I mean, all sorts of things which are going on. And yet you have this kind of application of resource. It strikes me that, you know, we keep talking about failing services, needing more tax, needing more money, etc. That we're spending it incorrectly.
The police now hunt as packs. And that, I'm afraid, is because, once again, they don't actually grasp the fundamentals of policing. Back in the day, now please forgive the history lesson, but in the late 70s, when I started my policing career, you would be told to go out onto the streets, night duty, for example, with your big raincoat on and your big pointy hat, and you would patrol the streets on your own, with only a small wooden stick for protection, maybe a pair of handcuffs if you were lucky, and a radio.
I mean, you might need a little more protection than that today, mightn't you?
You might do, but that's what we did. And it was very, very important, because whilst we were rattling shop door handles at 2 o'clock in the morning, because believe it or not, some people did forget to lock their shops when they went home, and other kind of things.
So what did you do if you found a shop unlocked? What would you do?
You get hold of the key holder and they come down and lock it, and be extremely grateful. And you would patrol the streets as well. I was particularly had a penchant for thief taking, so I'd be looking for burglars and car thieves and all that kind of stuff. And the public would see you patrolling on your own, and they knew you were vulnerable, and they appreciated the fact that you were patrolling the streets on your own.
Yeah.
And that vulnerability inside made them say, cool, you wouldn't catch me doing it, but I'm so glad that police officer is. And that's why on Christmas Day, when I'd be patrolling on my own, people would rush to their front doors, open it, say, come in, have a cup of tea and a mince pie. And that kind of thing happened regularly. Likewise.
And it would have done. And I think the other thing about it is that we've got so enthusiastic about certain kinds of recruitment that we've forgotten that if you want to be, or if you are a police officer, and I don't care if you're male or female, but you are going to have a certain level of fitness and strength. And that might be tougher to achieve for certain people who might be, you know, I don't know, shorter than others, or built less strongly, or naturally less fit, or whatever it is. I mean, I'd make a terrible police officer.
You have just fundamentally broken so many rules of the diversity, equality and inclusion brigade.
But I'm sorry, but I saw 2 police officers who were, at least I saw them, I suppose, in person. Let's just say that I would be able to run away quicker from them than... I'm sorry, that is not acceptable.
No. Well, all the standards have been dropped in the name of diversity, equality and inclusion. The fitness tests have been abandoned, largely, and even so, the fitness level that you do have to achieve in the beep test, I could do at 65 years of age.
So what would you do to this particular police force, the police arresting parents who are complaining about school? I mean, I would fire the head of that police force for allowing that to happen.
It's an irrelevance, I'm afraid, because policing remains in the grip of academia, and as long as that continues, you will have this kind of nonsense. Police services are so remote from those they serve. Senior police officers, the chief constables, who didn't like the rough and tumble of the front line and got themselves promoted as quickly as they could away from the grubbiness of policing, sit in their ivory towers behind their leather-topped desks, and they don't have a clue. And this is the kind of front line you end up with.
There you go. You heard it clearly from Peter Blacksley. Blimey. Wouldn't want to cross him on a dark night. 0344 499 1000. That's the telephone number to join the conversation. And next, oh good, the illegal migrant crisis continues. We'll find out the details. That's next on Talk.
There's British people, Australian people. The staff have said this is the first earthquake, the first big earthquake they've ever had. Apparently there was one 20 years ago, but they're still searching for some people who were staying in the hotel. Someone over there is missing his brother at the moment, so they're trying to work out who's here, who's not here. We don't know if we're going to be allowed back in the hotel anytime soon. And also, no news on planes coming in or leaving Bangkok.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:52 is the time. It's me, James Max, with you until 10 o'clock here on Talk with your Saturday morning breakfast shows. This 29th of March. So Peter Blexley is with me, and we're going to talk some stats. 29,881, not including yesterday. 6,639. 4,347. Those are three numbers relating to the numbers of migrants who have arrived. So the first number, 29,881, is the number of Channel migrants that arrived, not including yesterday, since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister.
Yep.
And as you've told me, Peter Blexley, 1,617 arrived in the last 7 days. This crisis has not been dealt with. They haven't stopped the boats. It still continues. We are being asked. So front page of the Mail, we're all going to be £1,000 worth off. And inside the Sun today, the only way to stop the boats, they've got Alt Mehmet, chairman of Migration Watch, talking about what could or should be done to stop these boat crossings. I find it astonishing that we are still entertaining this absolute appalling, I suppose, encouragement of human risk-taking, and that we are in some shape or form accepting the fact that we have to pay these benefits, that we're paying for their hotels, that we're paying for the policing, all these things, and yet we can't do the basic stuff for our own people. I find it astonishing.
Whether it's Sunak and stop the gangs, stop the boats, or it's Starmer and smash the gangs, clearly repeated governments are failing to do that. This is a scandal. They are treating us with utter contempt because apart from all the things that you mentioned, what about the risk to every man, woman and child in the UK? Because so many of these people that are rocking up on our shores have ditched their identity documents, passports and such like. We don't know who they are. We don't know what their backgrounds are. We don't know if they've got any criminal records. And we really do not know whether they pose a danger or not to our society.
Alt Mehmet has said, these are the 4 things that you need to do. 1, withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights.
Yeah.
2 is repeal the 1998 Human Rights Act. 3, no more hotels or pocket money for migrants. And 4, he says the boats would stop overnight. What do you do with the people here? Where do you send them? Where do you house them? Where do you put them?
Yeah, well, I'm not convinced the boats would stop overnight, but I agree with his first points of principle. I would also add to that.
So the points of principle deal with the fact that the law gives people the opportunity to fight their case.
The protection. It's protecting those who shouldn't be granted protection. It's not protecting you, me, every listener, every viewer, their children, their families. And let's remember, just to expand on the point I made in my previous statement, these kind of people have murdered and raped in our country. And that is an undeniable, provable fact.
Some of them have. I don't want to demonise people who haven't necessarily, I don't necessarily think that connecting the two helps, because I would say we have legal routes for people to arrive to seek asylum. These people, they say, they're desperate people and this and that and the other, but they spent thousands of pounds. So I would much rather have people paying thousands of pounds into a system and basically going into a queue. What I dislike is that we have a queue, we have people who want to come to this country, hundreds of thousands of people do, most of them legitimately. I don't agree with the numbers who are arriving legitimately, by the way. I think it's too high. But there is a queue system and there is a legitimate way that they can come here. And it's not as if they're escaping from a country. If they're coming from France, they're not escaping from a country that, they're going to be persecuted. So my view is that this is a European problem and we have to find a better way of sorting it. But also we've got to find a country where we can send people and just say, you know what, you're not coming here. If you haven't got a visa, if you haven't got an application process, or you either go in the queue and go and wait somewhere else.
In Calais, many of them are living in rancid, disgusting, vile, tented villages. And you've got daft, naive British women going out there with their Care for Calais charity and the such like, who are feeding them. And why are they in disgusting, tented villages? Because the French won't give them diddly squat.
But also the French don't know how to deal with it either, nor do the Germans, nor do the Spanish or the Italians. I mean, you go to Italian. So last year I went to Italy, I went to Florence, and as we were basically driving into the town centre, they said, lock your doors. I said, what? And they said, our parks outside the city have been taken over by migrants. They're sleeping there. They, the authorities won't house them, they won't clear them or anything else, and they're just taking whatever they can, and we've had taxis being stopped and people's wallets being taken, etc. Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing what's going on.
Of course, because they're flocking in across the Med like they are across the Channel into Greater Northern.
They are indeed. Now, let's just pop over to Vernon, who's in Staffordshire. Vernon, good morning.
No, greetings, James.
Good morning, Vernon.
And Mr. Max is on the air. Very nice.
Well, that's very kind. So, the only way to stop the boats is this comment by Alt Mehmet. Although, interestingly, Peter Blexley doesn't think the boats would stop overnight. What on earth we do, Vernon?
Well, this is deliberate, James.
Is it?
Every politician in Europe, they couldn't give a damn. This was just optics. They have no intention of smashing the gangs, stopping the boats. It's deliberate, because if it wasn't, it would have been done. For me, it's a very easy thing. You greet them at Calais, you take them to a Scottish island where there's a processing centre, and you have thousands of them there, beautiful tents, just like we did in the Nightingale hospitals, and you process them properly.
Oh, that's a good idea. So we find an abandoned Scottish island, and that's where they go.
Correct, but it's not abandoned because we provide catering, we provide better shelter than they get in France, and then we decide if they meet the criteria.
But wouldn't that encourage people to come here? So, for example, why are the French leaving them just to, sit in their own tented society? I mean, why are they doing that, and we are paying for hotels?
Because they know, James, yes, they know that the British government is stupid, and they are going to eventually just cross the water. There's a big sign at Calais saying, "Stupid English this way."
And if they don't meet the criteria, then what does James's plan have in store?
Wow.
My plan is quite simple. In the processing centre, you greet them, you meet them, you feed them, you do everything proper so that it meets with the English European Court of Human Rights. And if they don't meet the criteria, you put them on a big plane and you send them to Rwanda.
There we go. Vernon in Staffordshire, thank you very much indeed for that. We'll get more from Peter Blexley in the next hour. Plus, we're going to be turning our attention to a story which I'm absolutely flabbergasted. Apparently, we're all going to have to start apologising, for the colour of our skin. That's next. Coming up on Talk after the very latest news headlines.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up to 3 minutes past 7 o'clock, I'm James Max, and this is Talk, where I'm sitting in for Dr. David Bull, not only today, but tomorrow as well. And we're live from the top of the news building here in London. So, this morning, still to come, well, we've locked him in the studio, we've not let him out yet. He's only given me a 7.7 for the first hour, but we'll see if we can do better this hour. Former Met Detective Peter Blexley is in the studio to continue going through the papers.
James, don't be delicate about a 7.7.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine.
If you were a politician, and you achieve 77% of the vote, you'd have a landslide.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's good enough. Meanwhile, we're going to Tommy Walker. He's our journalist on the ground in Bangkok, giving us the very latest on yesterday's earthquake in Myanmar. Also, the latest news from across the pond with Caroline Faraday in Transatlantic talk, probably with the most appalling jingle ever created for any kind of radio show ever. Anyway, that'll be after 8. Senior broadcaster at the Eye, that's Benjamin Butterworth. Oh, and we have been desperate. Broadcaster, my old producer, Phil Dave, they'll be going head-to-head. I didn't write that. How rude. Meanwhile, we've got a royal update, a preview of this weekend's sporting news, also a Showbiz update, and we're going to find out about a Dubai chocolate bar that's flying off the shelves, that they're having to be so fast that they're having to be rationed. And also, you've heard of Reeves on the line, I'm sure, but this is not a normal kind of train disruption. No, this is the cause of most delays on your rails. Network Rail have a brand new top excuse for the late trains on the network. You will be astonished by what they're saying. It is absolutely amazing. But today, after this week's spring budget statement, Reeves' plan for the UK is almost as unpopular as Truss's budget. So, what has she done wrong? Plus, if you want to get involved in the conversation about stopping those boats, the numbers are astonishing. 1,617 people have arrived on our shores, excluding yesterday because we don't have the number yet, in the last 7 days. Billions is being spent on hotels. Billions is being spent on policing and processing, and yet they haven't stopped. The last government said stop the boats. This government said smash the gangs. They're not doing any of it. So how on earth do we stop those small boat crossings? You can give me a call. It's 0344 499 1000. We take your calls and we go through the big stories. That's all coming up here on Talk. Sharon's been in touch and has sent a message to Mike. Mike's on Monday to Friday. Anyway, I went to Birmingham, says Sharon, last week. It was absolutely disgusting. Everything was an absolute mess. It smelt of urine. What is happening to our country? Good idea, James. These people on benefits should be made to clean and tidy up our streets and pay back the time. I mean, I guess one of the things that I would sort of say is that if you have an incapacity benefit that for whatever reason you are genuinely incapacitated, then I would say, OK, fine, the benefit can be paid. If, however, you are seeking a job, looking for a job or otherwise, surely you should be giving back to society whilst you take that benefit.
My wife works with children with disabilities, and so, of course, I hear tales on a daily basis of people who have been so unfortunate to have been born into this world with crippling, sometimes life-shortening, horrendous disabilities. And, of course, the soul of our nation should be judged by how we treat the vulnerable, the elderly, the young, and people who have such unfortunate circumstances. So yes, they should have absolutely everything that they need to make their lives comfortable and enjoyable. That is absolutely right.
Sure.
Not for one moment would I want anyone who is utterly deserving to be deprived. In fact, I'd probably want them to be getting a bit more. But what I do have a huge problem with, and I make no apologies for repeating myself in this hour, is the reckless, the feckless, those who have benefit babies, those who feign it, those who pretend, those who walk into the benefit office with a walking stick and then 2 days later can be found running around their local park, for example. You know, and there is some work being done to catch those kind of people, but not enough. And I want the deserving to get what they need. I want the undeserving to be either encouraged, cajoled, or if need be, blooming well pushed, forced towards contributing in some way or another.
That does certainly make sense. Good morning to both of you. What's Rachel done wrong? She woke up. That's what she's done wrong. Good morning. Wow. Primary age children were allowed 10 days authorised. In the past, primary age children were allowed 10 days authorised leave. We took kids out of school. They all achieved high results, as Rich in Cheltenham. Look, if there's a system for dealing with these things, then I get it. But I think that one of the solutions that I would say is that maybe we need to start considering what the French do, which is having rolling half terms, which means that, you don't all just, everybody's on half term or everybody's on holiday at the same time, because then that can sort of dissipate some of the costs. Meanwhile, I said that I would open the phone lines, 0344 499 1000. And when I say I'm going to open the phone lines, it means it. Chris is in Epsom. Chris, good morning.
Oh, good morning, James. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
Okay, I've got a few things to say.
Oh.
The first thing, where's Yvette Cooper been for 2 months? I haven't seen her anywhere, our Home Office Minister.
It's true, actually. I haven't seen much of Yvette Cooper. And, I mean, she's normally quite efficient with what she says. And she says, I mean, maybe she's trying to... You know how... if somebody wants to sort of have a word with you about something, you kind of don't really want to have a meeting until you've got something to say. And I think at the moment she hasn't really got anything to say other than the fact that she's got a two-tier justice system. She's got jails which are overflowing and they haven't really done anything about that. We've got a policing system that seems to be failing, and we've got an asylum system that is broken and hasn't been fixed yet.
Yeah, she's the boss, but the boss of the Home Office, but everybody else is affecting her job. That's what I think, and that's why she hasn't been seen high the hair of, because she can't pass comment on anything because it's all out of her hands, although she has the title. Right, we tell the French 25% tax on French food, French wine, and French cheese. We have a trade imbalance with the French anyway. Our businesses won't suffer anywhere near what the French will. And the French farmers will go mental because they rely on the trade to the UK.
So you're suggesting that we adopt a bit of Trumpism just to say, right, look, we've had enough of all this nicey-nicey, it's time to get tough.
I was actually saying this before Trump came into his second presidency.
But the thing is that tariffs are a zero-sum game. If you're going to play the tariffs game, then what you really need to do is you need to strengthen your own businesses and your own sort of front line first. So if we were to do that, then we need to sort out our dairy businesses, our farming businesses, our wine-growing businesses.
Hold on. Before you go all that way, James. Right? Yeah. If you put 25% tariff, as you call it, on wine and cheese.
Yes.
All right. If they tried to do something back to us, the money we would save on the immigrants, right, the illegal immigrants breaking into our country with nefarious ideas of what they're going to do when they get here, the money we save on that, all right, we support the businesses that are not trade that lose out with France. And if they don't do it in the first week, we stick another 25% on.
I'm not sure. I hear where you're coming from, Chris. I'm not sure I see the logic. But one thing I would suggest is that in our country we make amazing cheese, amazing wines, fantastic food. We have incredible manufacturing opportunity. We do all sorts of things really well. We should really be focusing on those things that we do well and improving them. And also, I think we should be discussing with the French to say, look, the millions of pounds that we've given you to stop the boats hasn't really worked, so we need to come up with another plan.
Yeah. Also, James, the bigger picture of all of this is you can stem the tide across the channel, but you're not going to stop it. The problem is that you've got everybody flooding across the Mediterranean, and it needs to be a European-wide project to stop them coming across the Med.
I think that's probably right, Chris. Thank you very much indeed for your call. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number to get involved in the conversation. If you think you could stop the boats, by all means, give us a call. And if you've got a view on Rachel Reeves in terms of what she's done wrong, do give me a call on that. 0344 499 1000. And I will come back. In fact, I'll do a couple of your messages now, because otherwise, Peter, I just get really... And I'll involve you in this, because otherwise I just get so behind, and then I don't read them out, and then people get very cross at me. James, nice to hear you again, says Howard in Leicester. Can you help me regarding Labour's house building programme? I thought the target was 1.5 million homes by the end of this Parliament for England. Somehow it's changed to 1.3 million for the whole of the UK. Either way, it'll never happen. But if I'm correct, why is Labour not being held to account? Howard in Leicester, I think Labour will be held to account on this, and I think that they've forgotten a few major points when it comes to housing. there are enough planning permissions already in place to build all the houses we need. So in fact what they should be asking is, why aren't those houses being built? And partly it's because we don't have enough trained builders. Partly it's because the house builders themselves don't want to flood the market because they can't afford it, and because nobody's spoken to the lenders to come up with a better way to ensure that people can get the finance if they actually want to buy them.
That is very much your specialist field, James. I am humbled by your depth and breadth of knowledge, and I'm not sure I can contribute too much to this conversation other than to say, if there's any youngsters listening, and I'm talking about people that are around about school leaver age, or if there's any parents who've got kids of school leaving age, do you know what? You can earn a great living these days, and you're going to be in demand for a very long time if you go and do that apprenticeship and become a brickie,
yes,
a chippy,
yes,
a sparks,
yes,
a plumber.
Yes.
You know, plastering's very difficult on the shoulders and the elbows, but what you've got to remember is if you go into those trades, okay, you'll make good money, you'll have a house lot before your mates who have gone off to uni have. That's absolutely guaranteed. But remember, when you get to about 45 or so, to use the expression, you've got to go upstairs. In other words, you've got to get off the tools and get into supervision, because those trades do take their toll on you physically.
Keith in the Philippines has been back in touch, and he says, James, there's nothing wrong with being sans tie, providing the shirt is designed to be worn without a tie. To not wear a tie with a shirt that is designed to be worn with a tie does look scruffy, in my opinion, of course. So, Keith, I'm wondering whether you're thinking that the shirt that I'm wearing should be worn with a tie, because in fact it's a button-down collar, and I don't think this shirt, particularly as the collar is kind of uber designed, I don't think this is a shirt designed for a tie.
A navy pencil tie would look stunning with that shirt and jacket.
No. No. Absolutely not. James, general problem in the UK is Blair's children and universities don't realise that their degree just proves that they can complete a task and tick it to interview. Just because you've got a 50k loan doesn't mean that they know anything. Time served and situation and experience gives people value, but that doesn't work in equal society agenda. I hire and interview 150 per year, and UK grads are 90% waste of oxygen now due to the unis and their agenda and lack of tuition in real subjects, says Betty.
Yeah, but I bet they're good at Marxism. I bet they've got a fair dose of that ideology that they've been indoctrinated with
they have.
when they've gone to uni.
Yeah,
and my three all went to uni.
No, are they all Marxists?
You know, well, one is the wokest human being on earth. Of course, I still love him. We have some very lively conversations.
Is he Mr. Woke-tastic?
Oh, he's part of the wokerati, he really is. Bless him. And I love him dearly, but we have some very lively conversations, as you can probably imagine.
Yes.
And the younger two, who are both travelling the world at the moment, I think as they see how life is in impoverished countries, they're beginning to loosen their grip on Marxism, socialism, and all that kind of stuff.
It's
the realities of the planet.
Basically, it's you keep fighting for all the other poor, affected people until it comes to your shore. When it comes to your shore, and I was on the telly yesterday arguing with somebody, and then apparently as soon as it came to their shore, they're like, "Oh no, I don't want that." Yeah. And that's kind of the interesting thing. And the younger you are, chances are the tide is further out, so it takes longer for the water to come and to start lapping at your feet.
Yeah,
us oldies.
They're getting
I'm afraid I'm up to my knees. Anyway, John in Angus says, James, totally different subject from what you're talking about this morning. I was in Manchester last night and the Reform Party launch of our local election campaign. I thought that was in Birmingham. Yeah. Largest political... John, are you talking rubbish? It was Birmingham. It was in Birmingham, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
Yeah. So, John, why are you saying that it was in Manchester? Largest political rally since the Second World War. I have no idea how many people. 10,000 was mentioned. I don't think it was that many there. Not a word in my Times Online this morning, or maybe I've missed it. There hasn't been much in the papers about that reform thing. I did see that it was happening, but it was in Birmingham. Mick in Wallington says, Sentencing Council, College of Policing, welcome to class Marxism and control. Emma says, great to see you again. Why is no one talking about Rupert Lowe announcing an inquiry? I don't know, says Emma. in Belfast. No idea. Good morning, James. Well done to Peter Blexley for wearing a tie and neatly pulled up collar. So many tie wearers leave the top button exposed, which looks scruffy, and a tie shows an air of authority, not subservience. Well done, Peter, for sticking to his guns, says Michael. I seem to have really started something.
Thank you, Michael.
There you go. Howard says, James Peter is enjoying the show. Thank you. A point on the subject of abject incompetence within the legal and justice system. Quote from Thomas Jefferson: "Laws are written for ordinary people, so they must be based on ordinary rules of common sense. I'm older than Peter, was brought up respecting the police, no more."
Yeah.
Sue says, Sue spelt S-O-O. Yes, says Susan Strong. Sue, it's clear almost all institutions are two-tier. They have moved to the left and they've become progressively developed into a mob of ignorant morons. We're becoming a police state, says Richard. We have a socialist government who control the police. Betty has been back in touch, says, Peter, it's even worse. They're actively delaying or restricting the tax-paying public and farmers from renewing or obtaining firearms certificates, whilst you can buy what you want in an hour or two in most cities. There you go. Anyway, we will come back to some of those things, because, Peter, I want to ask you about this story. And I think this is a story that I will also open the phone lines to. The London Museum has urged staff to address the problem of, quote, embedded whiteness, unquote, as part of a diversity drive, it's emerged. The publicly funded museum focused on the history of the capital and has created a leaflet to help staff challenge concepts such as, quote, hierarchical working to promote inclusivity. Staff have been told that the museum's current culture and ways of working supports institutional forms of racism and must change. To do this, they must ask themselves, how am I contributing to advancing race equity in my daily work? And how will I know I am nurturing a safe space for everyone? Another question asks, am I making space and time for important conversations about race equity? How are we continuing to challenge embedded whiteness? I don't even know where to start with this.
Well, I'll help you out.
Must I apologise for being white and presenting on this show, not giving somebody else an opportunity?
This is all complete and utter balderdash, brought to you courtesy of the woke brigade, those who bang on about diversity, equality and inclusion, and there I go again, but it's true, they're an intolerant, poisonous lot, these people, who want to push their progressive ways upon us all to the point where they are now so intolerant they are being prejudicial against those of us who are indigenous, were born here, raised here, have raised further generations, future generations, and trace all our ancestry back just about as long as you can imagine.
I mean, I do find it absolutely astonishing that we are having these sorts of conversations. I think we all recognise that racism exists in society. I think most people would like to see it erased. But that doesn't necessarily mean apologising for things that we don't need to apologise for. It doesn't necessarily mean also that you shouldn't be proud of who you are and what you are and just get on with your life.
In the 70s, racism in my school and all that kind of stuff was rife, and it was appalling. And in the 80s, we were properly taught by our peers, generally speaking, by society, that we had to ditch all of that, we had to embrace others, and you know what? We did that. We absolutely did that, my generation, and they've become my friends. In fact, when I had a very unpleasant set of circumstances not so long ago, stemming from an article I wrote about racism in the police, 2 former colleagues rang me up and they said, are you all right, Blex? Because there was a huge pile-on by racists against me. And those 2 former colleagues of mine, of course, were both black. And they knew I was telling the truth. So we bought into all of this, right? And we are the ones that helped people integrate. They became our friends, our great friends, and all of that. And we loved all the sporting idols, from your Linford Christies to your Les Ferdinands, to all those people. But please let me just finish one moment, James, if I may. What then happened was we were actually told a lie, because the politicians allowed the floodgates to open, and they've let every single Tom, Dick and Harry into this country putting us at risk, ruining our culture, destroying our culture, and it's a lie. And these kind of people propagate it, and they are the enemy.
Okay. Embedded whiteness is a big problem now, says Museum. And I guess my question to you, listening and watching right now, is how on earth do you respond to a comment about embedded whiteness? I can't change whether I'm white. I can't actually change where I went to school. And I'm really sorry if you think that I speak with a clipped accent and went to a fee-paying school, and that means that I must apologise for the rest of my life, that I had some form of privilege. It wasn't my decision. And in the same way, embedded whiteness is a big problem now, says Museum. I mean, I've got two words that I would say to them, and they'll get me hauled off air. But I want to know how you respond to that, how you respond to embedded whiteness being identified as a problem in society. Is it something we ignore? Is it something that we robustly defend? Is it something that we need to set aside? Because my view is, if this museum is saying that, there's an argument to say that their funding should be removed. I cannot understand why or how government funding, public funding is being used, because it spreads, in my view, if you start talking about embedded whiteness and you start talking about things in those sorts of things, it's as bad as saying, embedded any other colourness. It's as racist in its tone, in its approach. But that's my view. What's yours? 0344 499 1000. Tell me about embedded whiteness. Is it a big problem? How do we tackle it? Or do we not tackle it at all? 0344 499 1000 on that and all the other things we've been discussing this morning, plus some more stories that we'll be getting from Peter. And after this, we're going to be going across to Bangkok to hear the very latest on the earthquake in Myanmar. That's all coming up on Talk.
We need to do all we can to stop people getting into this, what was the not fit for work category, which Liz Kendall says she's essentially getting rid of in her reforms. But there will still be this idea that once you're on some kind of sickness benefit, that's you out of the workforce forever. We need to reduce the number of people going into that category, because once you do, you sort of never come out of it. And then on the, so that's the stick, and on the carrot approach, we need to look at this mental health crisis. In the 2 million people say they can't work because of mental illness since the pandemic is just a staggering figure.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:28 is the time. We'll come back to your calls very shortly, I promise. 0344 499 1000. Just to refresh your memory on what we're talking about this morning, if you want to talk about Rachel Reeves and what she's done wrong, you can do so. If you want to tell me, and I know it's the same old story, boats, they continue to arrive, but on the other hand, Rishi said he'd stop them. Keir said he'd deal with the gangs. They're still coming. 1,617 people arrived on our shores in the last 7 days. What do we do to stop it? And also, embedded whiteness is a big problem now. Well, what would you do about embedded whiteness? I think I would probably take away the funding from the organisation that seems to think it's a problem. 0344 499 1000. Maybe that's embedding my whiteness in my view. It's just that I just think it adds to a divisive comment in society, doesn't it? What do you make of it? Embedded whiteness. I mean, it's like, well, yes, until the 1950s, until Windrush and various other things, the population was predominantly white in this country. So 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number to join the conversation. And also, if that wasn't enough, we're coming back to Peter Blexley to get some more stories. However, the number of people killed in Myanmar following a powerful earthquake, that's now risen to 1,002 people. 2,376, according to Sky News, have been injured, according to the country's military government. The head of the military government has now confirmed a further 30 are missing and ordered a prompt rescue effort following this tremendous 7.7 magnitude earthquake. It struck around 12:50 p.m. local time on Friday at a shallow depth of 6 miles. If they're shallow, apparently they're more devastating. The quake's epicentre about 10 miles from the city of Mandalay. There are also aftershocks, one of which measured a 6.4 magnitude 12 minutes later. So the question is, what is the impact? And we know that it's been as far away as Thailand. Joining me now is a journalist in Bangkok, Tommy Walker. Tommy, good morning to you from London. Give us the latest from where you are.
Yeah, hi. So as you can see behind me, there's a huge rescue effort right now to where this 30-story building collapsed because of the tremors from that earthquake in Myanmar yesterday. As you can see, there's cranes, we've seen drone technology, we've seen sniffer dogs. Hundreds of Thai rescuers are trying to find any survivors through this mountain of rubble, and that's where we're at the moment. The authorities say that 2 people have been located with no vital signs, and now the Bangkok governor, the city's governor, is saying that 15 people have been located with some vital signs. So we're waiting to get updates. This is a long operation. The rescuers have got challenges such as the heat. It's 36 degrees here in Bangkok. The debris is loose. So yeah, we're just waiting on an update, but it's a mammoth operation here.
And certainly, so information coming from Myanmar is really quite scant, partly because of the way that the nation is governed, partly because of the restrictions on foreign reporting. And of course, there you are in Thailand, in Bangkok, which is some way away. And we saw that the building that collapsed, which is obviously where you're standing at the moment, it was a construction site, so there were many construction workers on that site at the time. And we understand it was a government building being built in conjunction with Chinese investment and money, just showing that construction sites can be extremely dangerous places, and no amount of preparation for any kind of earthquake is going to make that structure safe until it's completed. This is obviously a massive tragedy. How have the Thai authorities and indeed people responded to the most extraordinary scenes where you are?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, there's hundreds of Thai rescuers and aid groups here at this site, trying to do whatever they can, initially trying to do a rescue recovery operation, but also providing, medical services and whatnot. I mean, the Thai government announced a state of emergency for Bangkok yesterday. The city was in shock. I mean, earthquakes don't happen in Bangkok. They're almost unprecedented. Experts tell us that it's a rare thing to happen here in the capital. So it's taken everyone by surprise. I mean, away from this damage of the building, I mean, this is the severe damage the earthquakes had, but around the city, buildings were swaying, high-rises were wobbling, windows were being punctured, thousands of people were being evacuated. It's really shook the city. So the Thai government's doing what it can. It closed down the local train services. It had a no-fly zone temporarily yesterday. Right now, things are going back to normal away from this site, but investigations will continue to how this happened and why wasn't no one in the know that it was going to happen, because no one expected this coming, and the authorities themselves either as well.
And this is the thing about earthquakes, that even at the best of times, with all the improvements in technology or otherwise, nobody quite knows for sure exactly where they're going to occur and indeed what the impact might be. But as you say, the pictures, that some of which we saw, were spectacular, where you have these incredible buildings with rooftop swimming pools, huge amounts of water spilling over the side of the buildings, you know, which are designed to move, were moving, and water just tipping out. And I'm assuming that we're dealing with a city perhaps in shock, but also with security services stretched. Where were you when the earthquake struck, and how, perhaps you can describe, you know, how you felt and what was going on?
So I was taking a lunchtime nap. I'd actually been traveling overnight, returning to Bangkok. So I was actually in bed, and then I woke up and I was swiftly jolted to my right side of my bed. And I knew that there was construction work in my apartment anyway, in my building. So I was thinking, is it the construction workers? And my whole apartment was swaying. So I opened the door, and people were evacuating. I was on the 24th, 25th floor, and one of the cleaners of the building said, "Run now, go, go, go!" And you know, debris was falling. It was very scary. I mean, when you're at that height, you actually start to think, "Am I going to get down in time?" So it was very scary. I ran to the bottom, to the ground floor, like thousands of others. And it was just such a strange thing to happen, because these things happen in the region, in other countries, in other states, in other territories. I mean, if you look at Taiwan, Hong Kong, in China, earthquakes are fairly common, but in Thailand, certainly Bangkok, it's not. So it was a big shock to the system. And again, just being in a high rise at that time was probably the scariest for most people when them buildings were wobbling and being rocked.
Absolutely. And just finally, before I let you go, have there been any aftershocks, or is it all calm now?
It's been all calm now. I mean, there has been warnings from the government about any potential aftershocks. You know, after the initial tremors that hit around about 1 o'clock yesterday, Bangkok time, there was warnings up until about 4 o'clock local time. Hasn't been anything, obviously, substantial that's happened, but the authorities are obviously alert and have promised to sort of upgrade the alert system, sending people text messages in case this happens again. I mean, the current system didn't seem to work. No one really got notifications, maybe a couple of 100,000 people in a city of 10 million in the first few minutes. So they've promised to do some changes that if this was to happen again, people might have more of a chance to know about it.
They might indeed. Tommy Walker, journalist in Bangkok. Stay safe. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's much appreciated. Meanwhile, 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number to join the conversation. We're talking about where Rachel Reeves has gone wrong. We're also talking about stopping the boats. And I know it's a subject that we talk about a lot, but still 1,617 people have arrived on our shores in the last 7 days. The government's still not doing anything about it. So whilst they're not doing anything about it, we'll talk about it. And also, if you want to get in the... If you want... Perhaps... The question on embedded whiteness is, how do you feel when somebody talks about it? How do you respond to something which we're being told by a museum is a big problem now? Because if somebody tells me that something's a big problem, then it's just like, OK, well, what do we do about it? Or do we just respond with the response that we've given? You tell me. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to Michael, who's in Worcestershire. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, James.
Good morning, Michael. What have you got for us?
I've got a simple plan that I think would stop the boats.
Oh, yes.
And all we need to do is when Border Force go out and they're notified of a boat to rescue,
yes,
they put a drone up, send it over, and they get footage of whoever is steering the boat. They then rescue the people. The person steering the boat is put in handcuffs, taken to court, mandatory 5-year prison sentence for people trafficking.
Can I just throw something into the mix, though?
Yeah.
From what I understand, the gangs train somebody to pilot the boat, so it's not the gangs who are piloting the boat. They're already taking the money, they're gone.
Yeah, it wouldn't matter, because whoever gets prosecuted and sent to prison for steering the boat, it would get round that why go if you're going to be the patsy that goes to prison? they would just stop sending the boats.
I could see that, but then you could say, OK, right, well, I'll take the fine for all of you, so I'm going to charge you all an enormous amount of money, because there's risk money for this. I don't think it would stop it, Michael. I see your point.
Reduce it. And in reality, it's not about a fine. Make sure they go to prison.
But I don't understand. OK, let me just bring Peter into this, because Peter, if I was trying to stop this, Peter, I mean, I hear what Michael says and using the justice system. What I would do is I would use undercover policing to find out who the gang leaders are. I'd be paying people to basically go off and pretend to be asylum seekers in France. I'd be finding out who they are, and I'd be pulling apart those gangs. I mean, they seem to have done none of it.
Yeah, that's a very high-risk strategy, the undercover policy you talk about. I worked undercover for over a decade, and often in foreign territories with the associated risks and all that kind of thing. There's some merit in that. There's some real merit in what Michael says as well, because really he's alluding to a deterrent, establishing a deterrent.
Yeah.
Rwanda was established as a deterrent.
But you see, Rwanda,
if
they'd added an extra 0 onto the number of people who were going to be shipped off to Rwanda, I would have said, yeah, that's a deterrent. But the fact that so few were going to go, I mean, they, you know, for all the numbers that they said, you know, the numbers of people that they said were going to be dealt with by the Rwanda scheme, that would have dealt with 1 day's worth of arrivals.
Deterrents work, and there's a really apt story from this week which absolutely nails it when it comes to deterrence.
OK, Michael, are you listening?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just believe that a deterrent is essential. And
let's hear Peter's deterrent. Hang on, let's hear Peter's deterrent.
Just Stop Oil announced this week that they're changing their tactics. They'll stop being disruptive. And you know why? Because the flaky, wokey glue themselves to the road and throw soup and idiotic climb bridges.
They ended up getting thrown in prison.
Don't like going to prison. And do you know what? I'm a stern critic of the judiciary, but on this occasion, the way they eventually got to grips and dealt with those Just Stop Oil protesters, they did it for the benefit of the people. The people spoke. It was bottom-up justice being delivered, and it stopped that bunch of clowns. And I say, well done to everybody involved.
Peter Blexley, thank you for that. We continue with our stories and everything else. And Michael, thank you for your call. We'll take some more calls in a few moments' time. It's 0344 499 1000. Plus, we'll find out who has spent £1 million of your pounds on flights. It's the most extraordinary story. I think we'll be getting hot under the collar. That's next on Talk.
Across the UK on DAB+. On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:42 is the time. Very good morning. It's me, James Max. I'm with you till 10 this Saturday, March the 29th. I know time is running fast. Oh, can't bear it when the clocks go forward. I always feel like discombobulated for a whole week. Peter Blex is with me for at least 15 minutes, and then we're going to let you go.
Well, thank you very much. To enjoy the rest of my Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, you've done your time. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number, and every so often I come onto this radio station and people say, James, you keep reading out the number and then you don't take any calls, and I'm taking as many calls as I can, Peter. Is that all right?
Please do.
Thanks. And also, people send in messages on the text machine and I get really behind. So Tim in Suffolk has said, stop all help to countries who won't take these people back, put our troops back on French beaches. Apparently, according to Sharon, the British government are damn stupid. David says illegal migrants, irrespective of the route available to them, they will always come if they are allowed to stay and have automatic access to everything so that we have worked so hard to put in place. It's very human nature. Andy in Cornwall says, James, I would set a limit on asylum seekers per year, only take them from UN camps in a deal that all illegal immigrants are returned to a UN camp. And James, forget two-tier policing. What about two-tier sticker distribution? Yesterday I saw the Home of Common Sense sticker on a diesel Fiesta. Where's my blooming sticker? Regards, Brian. I think this is referring to the car stickers that Mike Graham has had.
It is, Brian.
I haven't been sent one either.
Brian needs to speak to Mike on Monday, I would suggest, between 6 and 10.
Yeah, this is outside my orbit. Margaret, who's in Yorkshire. Talking of Yorkshires, I've had a real catastrophe.
Go on.
Well, I like to think I'm quite a good cook, and I'm quite good at cooking things. And for years, I've made the perfect Yorkshire pudding. And the last couple of times I've done them, I mean, the last ones I made, they were like okay, but the times before that, they're flat as a pancake. I don't know what's been going wrong. I've used the same recipe, the same this, the same oven, the same heat, the same lot, and my Yorkshires have been terrible.
Was your oil hot enough?
Yes. But smoking. I know.
That's odd.
It is very odd. So, and I don't know whether the tin's wrong.
Get a new measuring jug, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I've got to. I mean, I'm really upset about the whole
dimensions
thing.
Of something has changed, haven't they?
I think
clearly?
so. Because, I mean, you know, and I even tried a different Mary Berry recipe, which shoves in extra egg, because apparently makes them more fluffy. I want fluffy, crispy Yorkshire puddings.
Well, I'm not coming round till you've got this issue sorted.
No, well, I'm not having lunch till I've got it sorted. Anyway, 0344 499 1000 is that if you've got advice, then I'm very happy to take it. Meanwhile, there is another story that's in the papers today, which I'm absolutely astonished about. And John in Bradford, I will come to you very shortly. But, Peter, let me get your thoughts on this. David Lammy. So, where one starts with David Lammy, I don't know, but this one might. So, you know how the government and Rachel are coming to us for more money, because apparently they're black holes?
Oh, yes.
One of the things I would say is maybe you need to look at your own actions and your own spending before you come to us for more.
Quite right.
David Lammy has spent over £1 million on private flights in 3 months.
Yep.
Co-conspirators may remember Foreign Secretary David Lammy's lavish private jet habit, racking up a bill of £916,177 on flights in the first 3 months after the election.
Yeah.
Learjet Lammy, apparently. Newly released official figures so that the 3 months from October to December, he's racked up a whopping £1.2 million bill for the flights, the majority of which made up costs from his jaunts on the largest jet in the ministerial fleet, an Airbus A321. Private flights accounted for just over £1 million of the total bill.
Yeah, so first 6 months as Foreign Secretary, over £2.1 million spent on flights.
Now, I do understand his need to go to places. Now, he's been to the USA, he's been to Malawi, Zambia, Azerbaijan, Egypt, Israel, Palestine. I didn't realise that Palestine was a place, but there we go. Germany, France, China, Bangladesh, India, Vietnam, Philippines, South Korea, Indonesia, Nigeria, South Africa, Barbados, Guyana, Bahrain, Jordan, Italy, Moldova, Belgium, Malta, Luxembourg, Samoa, Ireland, Kuwait. I mean, it's unbelievable!
Ha! Hasn't been to Botswana, though, has he? Like I have in recent days. There you go. Anyway.
No, he hasn't been to Botswana.
No, he hasn't.
No.
So,
but what I find is that, look, I do understand. I've been fortunate enough to use a private jet on occasion. They do save an enormous amount of time. But you've got to look at the money and the organisation of all of this. There are scheduled flights to all of these places. Most reasonable people manage not to use this kind of travel, and if you are going to use that kind of travel, then it should be budgeted and it should be clearly explained and frankly justified.
And what would his cabinet colleague, the moribund Miliband, say about it?
Well, exactly. You can't
push
tell
for
us.
net zero.
You see, so here we have the net zero czar. I can see why people are angry. People are angry because you, the government, are telling us how to behave. You're putting taxes on us so that, you know, for our once or twice a year that we go abroad, you're saying that we've got to pay the tax, we've got to pay the price for it. And then you have this lunatic going all over the place, travelling on a private jet, which is the most toxic environment. Either lead by example. Or don't lecture to us. Don't do one and say the other. Not acceptable.
Man of the common man of the people, Lammy. He's left his Tottenham connections a long way behind, hasn't he? As he now swans around the world, racking up millions of pounds worth of expenditure.
Having said that, I mean, I'm quite keen to go for that job because I'm quite good at foreign travel.
Well, I mean, I guess there's a need that when you turn up somewhere in a foreign country and you are the foreign secretary, you've got to look presentable.
Yeah, of course. And you've got to, and there is a time and a place for turning up in a ministerial plane or a Royal Air Force jet or whatever it may be. And I get all of that. But if you are telling us that you haven't got enough money, if you are telling us that you need more tax, if you're telling us, then there are some things that have to go and some things which are not, exceptionally important. If you're telling us, no, everything's fine, we're going to be presenting, then, clean up our streets, sort the stuff out, get everything working. Meanwhile, let's go very quickly to John, who's in Bradford. John, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, John. Yeah. So, what should we do about the boats and all the problems that we've got?
Right. Well, I've got two ideas. The first one is for every boat that comes across, you revoke a French fishing licence. That's number one.
Right.
And number two is we set up a refugee camp and allow the UNHCR to run it and close it so nobody can come out. And people from the government go in to see if they qualify for...
So you would say that if you are an asylum seeker, that you are interned in this camp and not able to leave until or unless you've been processed?
That's right.
Because I think that is a big problem, isn't it, Peter? That, if people arrive in this country, and as you say, they don't have any papers, we don't know who they are and anything else, they have all their liberties, which strikes me as very peculiar, that, you in order to get to other countries, you've got to have some kind of visa or license or whatever it is, and then otherwise you don't have your liberty.
This is your second caller this morning that's talked about camps. Clearly, people are thinking about it, thinking, yes, why haven't we got these camps to put these people in?
I mean,
why
by
can't
all means, make them humane. Yeah. There we are. John in Bradford, thank you for your call. Peter, we get some more stories from you in just a few moments' time and take some more of your messages and calls. That's coming up on Talk.
We need to do all we can to stop people getting into this, what was the not fit for work category, which Liz Kendall says she's essentially getting rid of in her reforms. But there will still be this idea that once you're on some kind of sickness benefit, that's you out of the workforce forever. We need to reduce the number of people going into that category, because once you do, you sort of never come out of it. And then on the, so that's the stick, and on the carrot approach, we need to look at this mental health crisis. In the 2 million people say they can't work because of mental illness since the pandemic is just a staggering figure.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:54 is the time. I'll come back to Peter Blexley in just a moment for a final story or two. Meanwhile, it's time for some sports news. Oh, I've been saved. There's no jingle. Tom Clayton from TalkSport is here. Tom, I don't know what it is, but the Gremlins, Dave furiously pressing the buttons, and the sports jingle didn't happen. It's such a good jingle.
I'm devastated, as you can tell. I'm clearly very upset by that. Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it's just unbelievable. Anyway, let's talk about the FA Cup quarter-finals this weekend.
Yes, and there's 4 across, of course. We're into the quarter-finals.
There would be.
We're one game away from Wembley, from the semi-finals of the FA Cup. And it's interesting because this weekend we're going to see 8 teams, so one of which has won the FA Cup fairly recently, Manchester City. They won it within the last few years.
On the front page of The Sun today for all the wrong reasons.
And there are 3 teams still in the tournament who've never won the tournament.
Who are they?
So Fulham have never won it, Bournemouth have never won it, and Brighton have never won it.
Oh, look at you.
And then also Preston is still in the competition, despite the fact they've never won the tournament. Well, they've not won the tournament, I think, since in 86 years.
Right.
And there's a few other teams who've won it within 30 or 40 years ago. So
the first ever football match I saw was QPR versus Preston.
QPR Preston.
Yeah.
Now, nowadays, that would be a very turgid championship affair.
Yes, exactly. It was quite a turgid affair there. It kind of put me off football for life. 1-0, I think it was, to QPR.
Lifelong fan. I need a butt in here.
Sorry, which one?
There's nothing turgid about my beloved QPR.
I wasn't suggesting QPR were turgid. I'm saying Preston are turgid.
No, QPR's turgid as well. Anyway, let's move on to some tennis. That's much more exciting because at the Frinton-on-Sea Lawn Tennis Club today, we've got a 24-hour challenge. Pete Cleverley has been going, raising money for charity. Last time I looked, it was nearly £10,000 he's been raising charity. He's been playing since 9 o'clock yesterday morning. So well done to Pete.
Excellent.
Down at the Frinton-on-Sea Lawn Tennis Club, raising fantastic funds. Oh, you wanted to talk about Novak Djokovic?
Well, that was the one that I put on the list.
Oh, right, okay. You didn't want to talk about Pete Cleverley and his amazing charity raising.
Well, this is the thing. So I would consider this to be a secondary kind of achievement in a sense, in that Novak Djokovic, if he wins the final of the Miami Open tomorrow against Jan Mensik of the Czech Republic, he'll win his 100th career ATP title, which is astounding. You know, some people are lucky to win 1, and he's won 100, which would be incredible.
Okay, I know you've got to dash because you've got to go and do some news. However, Arsenal Football Club, what have they launched?
They've launched a dating show similar to First Dates.
Why?
And it's brilliant. Why not? That's the question.
And where do you watch it?
Well, it'll be on Arsenal TV, of course.
Okay, great.
So people will be able to sign up. The idea is that if you're single and you go to games on your own, you'll be put on a blind date with someone, and basically you get to watch the game, and you get filmed while you're watching a game of football whilst on a blind date. So
great.
It's extremely fun and something that everyone absolutely adores the idea of.
Tom Clayton, well, thank you very much indeed for that. I think I was washing my hair the day that show was on the telly. What a shame. There we go. You carry on and go and do your news bulletins. Much appreciated. That's Tom Clayton from TalkSport, bringing us up to date on all the sporting news. There we are. Much appreciated. Now, let's turn our attention to other matters. Peter, I guess we get nostalgic, and there's things in the papers today about things that have been rebranded. We all know that marathons are now Snickers, Starburst were Opal Fruit, Sif was Jif, etc., etc. We know all of those things.
Yes.
But when somebody changes a name to something just pointlessly, so WH Smith, we know that their stores are being sold. We know that a private equity firm is basically buying the high street part of it, or that the whole company is being sold to Medela Capital, owner of Hobbycraft, and we know that WH Smith on the high street has been struggling. We know that their international business will be still called WH Smith. So they've got stores all over the world in airports, and you can go to Smith's, and that's great.
Yeah.
But if you're on the high street, they're going to call it T.G. Jones. What idiot came up with that?
Somebody who works for this venture capital brand that's bought the high street, W.H. Smith's. But
I mean, if I was rebranding W.H. Smith, I think it's a great name. I would get it back to its roots. I would get it back to doing, sort of fun things, interesting things, and branding it properly.
Yeah, but the trouble is, you see, the brand has become very tired on the high street. I love W.H. Smith's because I'm old school. I have a paper and pen diary, and I still use Tipex, right? I would say that other correction fluids are available, but I don't think they are.
No.
I think it's the only one. And so I go there for that, and, I'm self-employed, so my accounting files and paperwork and all that stuff, I use the store. I need it. It's really important to me.
Well, you'll be able to go to T.G. Jones now.
But when I go there, it's largely deserted.
I know.
There's nobody in there.
And it's it's the pricing as well, don't get it wrong. Meanwhile, there we go. Peter Blexley, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on side and chatting away as we have done through the papers and the stories. I'm sure we'll see you again very soon here on Talk. Meanwhile, we'll be going across the Atlantic. We'll be catching up with Caroline Faraday, plus taking some more of your calls and talking about swans.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. It's 3 minutes past 8 o'clock on Saturday, the 29th of March. I'm James Max, sitting in for Dr. David Bull here on Talk. And yes, it's me, not only today, but tomorrow as well, all weekend. Yes, live from the top of the news building here in London. So, going to head this hour will be senior journalist at The Eye, and that's Benjamin Butterworth. Oh! And we must have been desperate because broadcaster, my old producer, Phil Dave, they'll be going to head. That's going to be at about 20 past 8 this morning. Very shortly, we're going to be getting the latest news from across the pond with Caroline Faraday in our Transatlantic talk. Rupert Bell will be giving us all the latest royal news, and we've got a Showbiz update courtesy of Callum Wells from The Sun. And Alan Tolhurst, chief reporter at Politics Home. He will have a look at the top political stories of the day. All this, and you'll be finding out about the Dubai chocolate bars that are flying off the shelves so fast that they're having to be rationed. And you'll heard of leaves on the line disrupting your train. Well, there's a new excuse in town, and it's bound to ruffle your feathers. But today, after this week's spring statement, Reeves' plan for the UK is almost as unpopular as Truss's budget. So I've been asking, what's she done wrong? Plus, we've also been discussing the boats, which are discussed in today's Sun newspaper. The numbers are astonishing. 1,617 people arrived in the last 7 days, and that's not including yesterday. So, the question is, well, how do we stop them? What should the government be doing to take action? And how do we end the scourge, if you like, of that? And also, are you ready to apologise for embedded whiteness? Let's talk about that too. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. You can send me a text. 87222. Start your text with the word talk. And you can message me on the socials at talkTV. And if that wasn't enough, I might even have some plugging to do. That's all coming up on Breakfast on Talk. So there we go. Now, before we get involved in things, let me just reiterate a couple of points. So if you want to get involved in the conversation, do give me a call. 0344 499 1000. I want to hear from you on what you think Rachel Reeves has done wrong. I want to hear from you as to how you think the boats should be stopped, because it's clear that the current government and the previous one had no Scooby-Doo. And also, I want to know how you would respond to being accused of embedded whiteness. I don't know about you, but other than maybe, I don't know, going abroad, going on holiday, getting a suntan, there's not a lot I can do about my skin colour. It is what it is. And when we talk about embedded whiteness, I do worry about whether we're bringing into the equation something that doesn't exist, or maybe you think it does exist. And in fact, we've got to tackle it. And that's why we have embedded racism and all these other things that we talk about, whether in our police service or indeed in hospitals or healthcare. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. Meanwhile, brace yourselves. It's one of the worst jingles ever created for radio. Let's go Transatlantic.
Transatlantic Talk with Caroline Faraday.
I mean, frankly, if I was trying to save money or fire somebody, that would be gone. Anyway, not my show. Caroline Faraday is a broadcaster and journalist, and she joins me live from the United States of America. Caroline, good morning to you.
Not a jingles guy. I think that's what we've discovered. You're just not a jingles guy.
No, I am a jingles guy, but if you're going to do them, like anything in life, if you're going to do it well.
Would you like a more sung approach?
I'd just like
old school? Transatlantic Talk, something like that.
I didn't know. I mean, I'd have a sort of think about like the overall branding. I mean, I'm a branding guy, so I think that good branding is important. Working as I do, either as chair of a club or trustee of a major international location, branding is important, and it should reflect your values.
Because sometimes you're just trying to polish a, you know what, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I think that's what they've done. The thing is that they've forgotten that, you know, you might not be able to
polish. What am I in that equation?
You might. No, you're perfect. But it's the jingle. So the jingle, the thing is that normally you might not be able to polish a you know what, but you can roll it in glitter. The thing is that somebody's dropped the glitter box. Anyway, let's talk about the Trump news, the gift that keeps on giving, the WhatsApp leak. I mean, is anybody going to get fired?
No. don't be daft. It's sort of double down, really. So I doubt anyone has missed what happened, but just a little reminder that instead of using the proper channels of government communication, the senior members of the Trump administration decided to coordinate the airstrikes on the Houthi rebels over, in fact, Signal, which is a bit like WhatsApp, except the messages disappear, including operational details. It's obviously an enormous security breach. It really put people at risk. It put the operation at risk. It put the people who were partaking in that operation at risk. Who even knows where the members who had that on their phone even were at the time? One for certain was in Russia. Whether those messages not only could be intercepted, but here's the key thing, of course, with the Signal app, those messages don't get recorded and don't get saved. They are supposed to be, those kind of official communications, any official communications, there's a record supposed to be kept of those. So there are a lot of questions, and there has been this sort of attempt at asking questions in an inquiry. But no, I can't see that that the Trump administration is going to do anything other than double down on those involved. He kind of went, "Oh, it's just an oopsie."
I mean, I do find it astonishing, but, we know that stuff won't stick unless necessarily they wanted to. Meanwhile, Mark Carney's on the front page of the Telegraph, not necessarily for a reason that he would like, because he's been accused of plagiarism whilst at Oxford. But no, that's not the story. The story that you want to talk about is that he has said in very clear terms that the special relationship with the United States of America is over. He's got a point. I mean, America just shoved a whole load of tariffs on them, and he wants to get elected when they have a snap election at the end of April.
Yeah, so, I mean, he wants a stronger mandate to deal with the United States. Mark Carney, who's coming in Canada, of course. And even, Trudeau, before he left, was like, what's Canada? Like, they're the most inoffensive country.
But then so's
what
Greenland.
What have we done to you, Dan?
I mean, I do find it astonishing
let's talk about Greenland.
I mean, J.D. Vance turns up. I mean, it's a partial victory for the Greenlanders. And I suppose one thing that this has done is highlighted the fact that I was kind of unaware that Denmark was kind of the sovereign nation and that Greenlanders themselves have been looking to try and get some kind of independence from that relationship. Although, it was a relationship that was there and it's kind of tolerated and it's sort of fine. But it would appear as if the Americans are saying, no, well, that change in relationship means that we've got a strategic problem and therefore they think that Greenland should be taken and subsumed into the United States. I mean, forget it. It ain't happening, is it?
Well, so J.D. Vance was originally the vice president. Of course, his wife originally was going on this trip to Greenland. And there was such a backlash that he was like, well, I'll go along and we'll all go dog sledding and won't this be fun? And then all of the kind of frivolous fun stuff out and about in Greenland got cut from this trip and they just went to the military base. He was accompanied, by the way, as well by Mike Waltz, of course, who was the person who added the journalist to that aforementioned Signal group, which is how that whole story came about, that the journalist was added to it. And it was actually Mike Waltz. So if it was a timing thing and they're trying to say to Denmark, trying to say to Greenland, hey, Denmark aren't taking care of you, we'll take care of you. They turned up with bumbling incompetence in order to persuade them to do it. It also just had that ring of kind of an old school security racket, of kind of going in with a baseball bat and being like, somebody could beat up the place if you don't get somebody in for some security. And you're like, could they now? So, I mean, it definitely wasn't. And the one thing I was really curious about, if you were in Greenland, where they are very rich in earth minerals, by the way, terrible coincidence, isn't it, considering that's what America would really like. But if you're in Greenland and you currently get free healthcare under Denmark, are you going to suddenly opt for the terrible system in the United States where millions of people are in medical debt because they get sick? I mean, there's a bit more to it than somebody could come here and bother you.
It is extraordinary, the optics of what they're doing, the common sense of what they're doing. But look, I guess we're going to have to get used to the fact that over the next 4 years or however long he's in power, the American fiasco is just going to continue. Businesses will, will either make money or we won't. We'll either do deals or we won't. We kind of have to work on the basis that America may or may not be the reliable ally that we've had before, and we just need to get on with ourselves. And I mean, some of the points that Donald Trump makes in terms of either Europe's contribution to its own defence or various other things, just because America is a superpower doesn't necessarily mean that America should have to foot all the bill. So I'd understand where they're coming from. Whether or not annexation of either Greenland or indeed Canada will work is another matter. Meanwhile, let's talk very quickly about Trump's administration. How's he doing?
I think, by the way, just on that note about whether or not they're a reliable ally, I have told this anecdote before, but it's really relevant, James, because when I had my interview to be an American citizen, right? So it was during Trump 1.0. One of the questions that you're asking that interview is, would you take up arms for the United States? And she very specifically said, if there was a war between the United States and the UK, would you be prepared to fight for the United States? And I said, I understand what answer you're looking for from me. As one of your oldest allies, I would hope that situation would never arise. And this was Trump 1.0, not even this time around where they're more organised and definitely that hostility is more overt. She said, in the current climate, you can't be too sure. And I think back and hark back to those words about whether or not we can count on, whether or not the UK can count on the United States as an ally going forwards. How's he doing? I mean, I think that Democrats would very much like to flip a seat in the House to feel that they've got a little bit more of a skin in the game. Trump had somebody who was going to go off to the UN, and he's pretty keen that they don't do that. And then they've had a few kind of court cases, because this is where some of the things that Trump is doing is being challenged with the deportations. And he's also had a court case where he shut down the Voice of America, which has been about forever, and some of the agency things. And at the moment, there are judges blocking certain things, and this is all getting played out in the courts. He's had a few losses there. But again, with the deportations, they ignored it and did it anyway. So,
and that's the point, which is the difference between, I suppose, our administration here and theirs there, which is if Trump doesn't like something, even if the courts say they're doing it, he just finds a way to fire them all. There we go. Caroline, thank you very much indeed for updating us on the gift that keeps on giving, everything that's happening in America.
Transatlantic Talk with Caroline Barony.
I mean, seriously, under my watch, that'll be gone. Not Caroline, the jingle. Caroline Faraday, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, let's get back to our conversation about this story, which I do find exceptionally challenging and troubling. Daily Mail. Embedded whiteness is a big problem now, according to a museum. The London Museum has urged staff to address the problem of embedded whiteness as part of a diversity drive. They've said the whole range of things. Challenge whiteness, including asking whether they can promote less hierarchical working, whether they can encourage everyone to bring their whole selves to work. It's not the first time that the London Museum, which was known as the Museum of London until 2024, has caused controversy over its approach to diversity and equality. Dr. Rebecca Redfern, a curator at the museum, produced research suggesting that racism in medieval England may have contributed to black people dying from bubonic plague. Alex is in Birmingham. Hello, Alex.
Good morning, James. Good morning to your guests.
Good morning. It's just me now. I've cleared out the guests. I've got some coming in a moment, though. I don't know, is that my embedded whiteness taking place, that I'm just, I don't know, exerting my authority over everybody?
Yeah, it might be that you don't actually realise that your whiteness is such a problem. Maybe that's probably what's happening. But on a more serious note, I've seen this in universities and I've seen this in real life. And I've challenged it and I've said, what is my whiteness? What my existence is what you're saying. My mere existence offends you and you're allowed to literally insult me for being who I am.
But isn't it also that people are conflating and forgetting the fact that as an individual, you'll be white, you'll be black, you'll be of mixed race, all sorts of, from wherever. And, you are being put into a category that because of your physical attributes, this is where you are, as opposed to, no, we live in a society which should see meritocracy, which would see, and I know that there are places where people are racist and sexist and homophobic and anti-Semitic and all these things, and we need to rid ourselves of all that stuff, but that means that the individual shouldn't then be tarred with a brush. That if you say embedded whiteness, it's sort of like, if you included somebody of embedded blackness or something, I mean, you'd be cancelled and hauled out of court, and rightly so.
Absolutely. And I think I saw the same sort of equal sort of comments being used with universities. So we had the original Bain statement, and then Black Lives Matters happened in 2020, and then we decided they wanted to break up that. They wanted to be identified singularly. Then that didn't get too far. They came back with a new title, which I find incredibly divisive and offensive, and it's called the global majority. So as I am the minority in your country, I want you to remember I am the global majority.
And you see, that again I find problematic. I mean, I had a bit of a skirmish yesterday because we were talking about I suppose some of the comments that Nigel Farage had made in terms of women and men and the choices that you make in work and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know, somebody chose to get very cross with me and send me emails of protests and all this, and I was misogynistic and this. And it's just like, no, I'm really not. But the point is that in life, as an individual, you, me, we all have to take different choices, and some of them are imposed on us, and you might choose to fight them, and some of them are personal choices. But as soon as you start labelling everybody with the same labels and saying either women can't do this or they can do that, or women are this or men are that, and all this sort of, then you're putting everybody in the same box. It's like, no, we're not. We're not necessarily that grouping. Stop grouping everybody together.
Yeah, and I think with the whiteness attack, it wasn't about the equality. It was about the equity. It was basically saying, give me the job and make the job work for me. It's claiming you had privilege for being white, just for existing, and wanting to take more privilege than anybody else. Whereas to say the white working classes are the most overlooked still in any demographic and the most underperforming. And in education, we're always saying they always pitch everything against the white student, the gap between attainment and who's getting what degree and what value. And really, you've got your Chinese and you've got everyone, and you've got like the white student who doesn't even get to university from the white working classes. I mean,
you have a look at the performance, particularly of some students, particularly Chinese students, who seem to absolutely excel. There is absolutely no limit to attainment, and it doesn't matter where you come from or what background you come from. It rather depends on how hard you work and your aptitude.
Yeah, exactly that. And it just seems when this all started, everyone was just like, well, I'm not going to choose the person for the job because of the colour of their skin, because that would be racist. I'm going to choose the best person for the job. But that's no longer allowed anymore. So this has all been bent out of proportion and the way that it's working. But I imagine, somewhere down the line, if we get reform in, that we will actually get some common sense.
So what would you do with the London Museum and its funding?
I would remove it immediately, and I would just say to them that there's a deep, deep offence there. The natives of the country can't be held accountable for their mere, for the gradient of skin or pigmentation that they have.
Just before I let you go, Alex, sorry to interrupt, but just before I let you go, so you're in Birmingham. How bad is the bin situation where you are?
It is pretty bad. So we had certain areas that literally caused the strike by actually the way that they handled rubbish. So there were rats being, jumping out of bin men and stuff, or bin ladies, and that became a problem. So they literally said, we're not doing these areas, and it became an escalating strike, and now it's just the same for everybody else. It's pretty bad. In some areas, people are still trying to contain it in the bin areas and stuff like that. But I was at the reform launch last night.
Oh, yes, how was that? Because I'm going to talk about that in a moment, because I understand that Nigel Farage came on stage in a JCB digger. I mean, he's a showman, that one. He's a showman.
It was a showman, but it was excellent. It was professional. Now, if that's professionalising the party is what they needed to do, they did it last night. It was very slick, it was well put together, and it was enjoyable. He came on the JCB because it was a machine that could actually do the potholes twice as fast for half the price, because potholes was one of the...
Is it because he's trying to get some money from Mr. Bamford?
Well, potentially. I mean, there were some fantastic new candidates they were launching as well, some really fantastic new candidates coming in as well. So there is a lot more going on. But just on that party, I think they need Rupert Loback and I think they need Ben Habib. We need to unite. If we keep on fragmenting, we won't win the election. We need to really unite.
That's a matter for them to discuss and them to work out how on earth they bring in those wings of the party. But there we go. Alex in Birmingham, thank you. 0344 499 1000. That's the telephone number to get involved in the conversation. I said I'd open the phone lines, and they are open. If you want to talk about embedded whiteness, if you want to talk about any of the stories that we're covering this morning, including where Rachel Reeves has gone wrong, you are welcome. I will come back also to your comments as well. 87222 on the text. Start your text with the word talk, and the tweets as well. Meanwhile, next we're going to be turning our attention to our head-to-head panel. I'm going to be joined live in the studio by broadcaster Phil Dave and political commentator Benjamin Butterworth. That's next on Talk.
We need to do all we can to stop people getting into this, what was the not fit for work category, which Liz Kendall says she's essentially getting rid of in her reforms. But there will still be this idea that once you're on some kind of sickness benefit, that's you out of the workforce forever. We need to reduce the number of people going into that category, because once you do, you sort of never come out of it. And then on the, so that's the stick, and on the carrot approach, we need to look at this mental health crisis. In the 2 million people say they can't work because of mental illness since the pandemic is just a staggering figure.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
26 minutes past 8. Very good morning. If you just joined us, where have you been? It's Saturday Breakfast with me, James Max. I am with you until 10, in for Dr. David Bull. Wonder if he's in Birmingham. Anyway, I'm with you tomorrow morning as well from 6 till 10 for your Sunday breakfast as well. Yeah, the clocks are going forward tomorrow. Yeah, you've forgotten to do that. Anyway, If you want to get involved in the conversation at any time, so I'll squeeze as many of your calls in between now and 10. 0344 499 1000, that's the telephone number. If you want to talk about the conversation about Rachel Reeves' plan, which is almost as unpopular as Truss's budget, apparently, but what's she done wrong? We've been talking about that. We've also been talking about two-tier sentencing in our court system and how much faith you have in that. And if you want to have a comment also on embedded whiteness, apparently is a big problem now, according to a museum. That's the London Museum. So I want to know, I don't know, how would you even respond to that accusation? I don't know. Can you go and have a skin graft? I don't know. 0344 499 1000. That's the telephone number. Do give me a call and have your say. And the story that keeps on giving, inevitably, with 1,617 so far, not including yesterday, arrivals on small boats. What are we going to do about that? 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, it's time for us to turn our attention. Oh, don't tell me we've got another one of these awful stings. Oh, seriously? I would do a Trump in this place and have some firings. OK, let's do a head-to-head.
Head-to-head.
I mean, the 1970s could have produced a better jingle than that. I mean, seriously, whoever put that together on work experience, they're not worthy. My poor guests, broadcaster Phil, Dave, and indeed political commentator Benjamin Butterworth, welcome to you both, and I apologise for the jingle.
That's all right. I just was rather impressed when you said to do a Trump in the studio. No, you won't. We're here. Thank you very much indeed.
Dear, oh dear. Is that that's why we have such a poor jingle? That's the level of debate we're going to have. OK, let's talk about this. It's on the front page of the I newspaper, but it's kind of sort of everywhere, really. Rachel Reeves, her plan for the UK is almost as unpopular as the Truss budget. And it's partly because Truss said, I'm going to grow the economy, and she crashed it. Reeves has said, I'm going to grow the economy, and she's taking more money off you. So I don't know who's worse, except the fact that Rachel Reeves is still in her job, talking down to us like we're all stupid, whereas she should be looking in the mirror. I've never seen such a terrible plan for the economy. Benjamin Butterworth, defend the woman.
Well, I mean, the two budgets are on. This one wasn't a budget, of course, it was a spring statement, but they're completely different because, you know, Liz Truss was an unforced error in which the economy nosedived like it hasn't on any other occasion. And what Rachel Reeves has to deal with is the fact that the books simply don't add up. Anybody that ran a business would know you've got to tackle that.
Excuse me. Rachel Reeves, as a direct result, so you're accusing Truss of naivety, which I would agree with in terms of how she communicated to markets. But Reeves,
but she at least had the right idea.
Well, not necessarily. Look, grow the economy, great idea. Everybody wants to do that. But the plans that she put in place were ridiculous, and her naivety when it came to dealing with markets. But Rachel Reeves has made choices which have adversely affected economic growth, full stop. So, national insurance, that was a choice she made that put up our interest rates. So most of the money she's going to raise through extra tax. The VAT on school fees. I understand ideologically why you might like to do it, but she didn't prepare, she didn't put the money in. So all of the money she says she's going to raise, she's not. It's an ideological decision. And then the other decisions that she's taken that will ramp up the cost of borrowing. So the extra cost of borrowing is going to be taken up by the extra tax that she's raised. So those are her decisions.
Well, the VAT on private schools is probably your pet peeve. It's not something that's...
It's not my pet peeve. I just think it's anti-choice.
Don't pretend that it's affected the growth of the economy. And indeed, you'll find few Labour policies more popular, consistently more popular, than VAT on private schools.
No,
so
sure.
that's
what I said.
That's the only reason.
But that's what I said. It's an ideological decision. Phil, bringing you into this, Rachel Reeves...
Well, I personally think it's staggering that sort of what we've focused on so far without actually mentioning that some of the most vulnerable people in this country are going to be affected by her somewhat cruel and despicable acts in terms of the way that she's sort of targeting benefits. And the way I look at it is if you want to save money instantly, sort this blooming nonsense out with all of these illegal migrants coming here every single day. It is insane, the amount of money that we are turfing out at them, and yet no one seems to think that that's where we could make savings.
I mean, I find it extraordinary that on one hand, how do you justify this, Benjamin? So you can turn up to this country on a small boat. You might be an economic migrant. You might not be. You might be genuinely an asylum seeker, but you could turn up and you could be an economic migrant and you will be given hotel and allowances and all this sort of business. And you can be an older person in society who's just on the cusp, £12,500, £13,000, whatever it is, and then suddenly you have your winter fuel allowance taken away. tell me and justify how on earth those choices are right.
Well, first of all, the problem of people arriving on boats is obviously not welcome, and the number of people being processed, how quickly they're being processed, has gone up. This has been the biggest deportation flights in British history, and so at least someone's trying to do something about that. On the question of pensioners, actually, if you're
why
being,
do we give
if you're
them the
being
money
honest,
in the first place, though? That's what I'm baffled by.
Off the top of my head, I think they get £40 a week, so and they get a hotel to live in.
Thousands of them here.
It's not as though they're individually getting a lot.
If they don't have any documents, either because they've lost them or because they never had them in the first place, why on earth are we allowing them freedom of movement?
Please, lost
them.
Yeah,
no, I understand. But
well, I don't think we should, but neither does the government, and neither did the last government.
They're put in hotels. They've got freedom. They can go where they like, do what they like, and they disappear off.
Well, I think those are often secure hotels in which they're not really meant to leave outside observation. But on the question of pensioners, actually, if you were being honest, and if any government was being totally honest, the cost of paying retirees is a massive problem for balancing the books. This year alone, it cost £165 billion.
Why is it a problem?
It will rise by £11 billion because of the triple lock. It is ridiculous that in the next couple of weeks, pensioners, which is the richest cohort in society now, it's completely different to a generation ago, they will get a rise in their pension double what inflation is.
Good.
Now, no, not good. Actually, because why?
No, they've paid into the system their whole life.
Why? Well, good point.
Because
they've taken.
This is
have
rubbish.
taken 130% of what they put in.
No, sorry.
So if they got out what they put in, they wouldn't be getting any pension by this
point. You're talking nonsense.
I'm not talking nonsense.
No. Here's the point. It rather depends on what kind of inflation you talk about. Because if you're talking about inflation, well, we've seen food inflation and fuel inflation well above the levels that you're talking about. And that disproportionately affects older people, number one. Number two...
Well, I don't think fuel inflation does, because they're not driving to work every day, are they? Like workers on the minimum wage. They're the people we should be helping.
Well, they got stung as well.
The quarter of retirees are worth more than £1 million.
Sure.
I think it is economically wrong and morally unjustifiable that we take from people working in Aldi or Sainsbury's on 20k, and we take their tax money and
with
we
all
give
due
it
respect,
to champagne funds for the elderly.
I'm sorry.
Champagne funds for the elderly. First and foremost, it might be morally wrong, but it doesn't mean that just because something's morally wrong that you do something else.
You think you should take from them? A minute ago, you had a problem with benefits. Now you say you should take from the poor and give to the rich purely because they think
but you're misunderstanding. I'm sorry, you're misrepresenting how the tax system works. Because if you are one of those wealthy pensioners, then first of all you will be paying income tax. And so, if for example you were if you were wealthy and you were receiving that pension, you will receive and start paying tax at 45%. Secondly, when you die, you will be paying 40% on your estate. Thirdly, you have probably paid quite a lot of money in stamp duty. Fourthly, you're probably paying quite a lot in council tax and various other things. These people are contributing to society in many different ways. And if you're trying to tell me that, well, in fact, we should be basically taking away from the rich, redistributing to the poor, then hello, Mr. Socialist, goodbye. I'm sorry, you just removed aspiration, which gives me a perfect opportunity to talk about a fantastic column in today's FT.
Good Lord.
Which, if you...
What's it called?
It's called the FT.
No.
And it's called...
the column?
It's called Opinion. You can't grow an economy... You can't grow an economy by crushing aspiration, written by a fantastic columnist who genuinely knows what he's talking about. Oh, James Max is fantastic read. No, seriously,
what is with
though.
that photo?
But you are so wrong, because I tell you what, I'm the most Blairite person you'll meet. Aspiration is exactly what
opened the floodgates.
Is what a generation of young people want. Tell me how
he started the war in Iraq.
How is a young person who wants to be an entrepreneur, wants to take risks, who wants to have the safety net to start a family with their wife and kids, for example, how are they meant to do that when the average home is 12 times the average income? It has completely distorted our economy.
Blair did that.
Yeah, but hang on a second. Who's disputing that? No, but who's disputing that, though? That I agree completely. There is no ability to have aspiration in this country anymore. But you can't blame the elderly for that. You can't blame people who are having their welfare cut.
People over the age of 50 own £500 billion of buy-to-let properties. Okay, so that means it is strangling the market, and you have a situation.
No, what's strangling the market is oversaturation of population, where you've got people that demand for property in this country.
Extra people living in this country, and so you talk about Blairite. Blair opened the doors. Blair's created your problem. Blair,
what you do,
and then Brown, and then others started to put stamp duty on houses, which then created inflation within the housing market.
Well, I think low interest rates go some way to explaining the massive, crazy inflation we've seen in housing markets, because people could borrow more, and it sent the market distorted from people's incomes.
That shows that you misunderstand the market.
No, that's a massive part of it. And you read lots of reports on the inflation that happened under the Blair years. That was a massive rise in the ability to borrow and in artificially inflating the value of houses.
And then you had all those people saying, oh, it wasn't anything to do with Blair or Brown that the economy crashed.
But the fact is that...
And then we bail out the banks who messed up with our money in the first blooming place, and now we can't borrow from them.
Well, you hadn't bailed out the banks to tell you what, you really wouldn't have an economy. That was not a choice. And even George Osborne would agree with that.
It wasn't a choice. You had to bail out the banks.
George Osborne, that really successful chancellor.
But then he was slightly more successful than the current one.
Slightly, not much.
Oh.
The fact is that, you know, when you have to put £11 billion on the cost of pensions to protect the triple lock, I think it is unjustified to say that there is a section of public spending bigger than almost any other department that is protected. And if you're going to target disabled and wheelchairs, I think that millionaire pensioners should also get
paid off with your millionaire pensioners. Right, anyway, we're going to go...
You're almost one of them.
I'm going to give you some more nonsense. You see, you are ageist. You are ageist, and
I'm not.
You are...
To be fair, that was quite amusing.
All right, we'll come back for some more abuse after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
8:40 is the time. It's me, James Max, with you until 10 o'clock here on Talk, where I'm joined by my head-to-head panel, broadcaster Phil Dave and political commentator Benjamin Butterworth. Frankly, after the abuse I've received, I'm quite surprised that I'm even going to let them back into the studio. But let's go to Anne, who's in Sussex, who wants to join the conversation. Anne, good morning. You're going to save me from these two.
Oh, my God. Good morning to you, James. I haven't been listening very long, but I listened to the guy rambling on about the wealthy cohort of pensioners. And in one sense, there is. The wealthy cohort of pensioners, not the ones he's really talking about, the ones who receive the high pensions in local government, the health service. that is costing us in our council tax a fortune.
You see, that's a very good point, Anne, because, Benjamin, how would you respond to that? That you talk about the cost of pensions and pensioners. So there will be many people who have been public servants, who have worked for 30 years, and then they end up on a final salary pension that you and I are paying for. There are many people who, for example, I just wrote in my little article, actually, about the CEO role. How on earth can a CEO of a local authority be paid £225,000 as their base salary, plus all sorts of benefits or otherwise, which assuming if what Anne says is right in terms of pension or otherwise. These are very, very expensive things that, the government could or should be addressing. You can't have people retiring at the age of 50 on a full pension, given that everybody else has got to wait till well into their 60s before they can claim.
Well, I totally agree. I mean, those final salary pensions are not available now for, anybody that's my age in a public sector job is never going to get a pension like that. So, yes, it's a massive cost. But on the point of how much a CEO is paid, I mean, look, councils sometimes represent millions of people and employ thousands. So I'm
the
not
Prime
sure
Minister represents the whole country.
Yeah, but it's
the Prime Minister's salary
personally,
is out of sync.
Yeah, but it's not them personally necessarily who are doing the employing, is it? Because if they represent a council, if they're on a council, they're an elected figure, and therefore they're a public figure.
But the ones on 200k are the
No,
the
they're
chief
not an
execs.
elected figure. That's the chief executive. But Anne, so what do you make of what Benjamin has said? Has he given you any kind of justification as to what the nonsense that he's spouting?
Sorry, of course not, because I don't know how old he is, but he hasn't been around long enough to see the contribution that people like me have made. I worked in the voluntary sector. I set up quite a few charities that are doing very well. I never earned a penny, but they're all highly paid in the leading workers in the charity section. And then I foolishly, because I'd seen the huge costs and worry of older people retiring and the paucity of care, I foolishly went into independent living with one of the largest in the country that are just increasing the costs. I'm really quite frightened. Well, a lot of us are now. What are we going to do? I've given to this country, and many like me, especially the women, we've done all the work for nothing. We've supported the community. We took care of the older and the young, and we're the ones being slammed and slated. You're not touching those. The huge salaries that he talks about, well, we're paying for those. When we had town clerks, our local government worked efficiently. The huge increase in salaries hasn't brought in all the, really excellent work in our communities that we need. I don't refer, potholes are always referred to, but it's more than that. It's the state of our parks, our gardens, everything that goes on that we are paying because the government, with their sleight of hand over decades, have taken it from central government costs to the local council taxpayers.
I think you've made some very excellent points and indeed justified the case that, just basically pointing the finger at quasi-wealthy pensioners is a pretty lame argument when you come to talking about the economy. But Anne, thank you very much indeed for your call.
I want it known for the record, not everyone doesn't appreciate older people, so... and the contribution that they've made to society. So,
right, well,
fear not, Anne.
Well, I was going to say thank you. Anyway, let's talk about another story which is in the papers today. Judges defy Starmer on two-tier sentencing, and I think this is an area where, in fact, dare I suggest, the government, Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, and indeed Keir Starmer are both against this. The judges now defy Keir Starmer by refusing to scrap two-tier rules. Sentencing Council has rejected government demands to drop plans that require judges to consider offenders' racial, cultural and religious background when deciding whether to impose jail or community sentence. Phil, this cannot be right that somebody decides on the basis of your skin colour or your religion how long you should go behind bars for having done something.
I find myself in a very curious position, something I never thought I'd admit on national radio. I think I'm in agreement with Sir Keir Starmer and indeed Shabana Mahmood, because I can't get my head around how anyone in their right mind, not to mention someone who's in such a position of authority in this country, such as people behind the way people are sentenced, would make such a racist and revolting decision. I literally can't get my head around it. How on earth does anyone think it's acceptable to look at the colour of someone's skin and say that would depend on how you're treated, whether it's for better or for worse?
I suppose the argument that it was the Conservative government that allowed this to come in, so it's worth noting that. It would never have come in if they had opposed it. But the argument would be that we already have a long-standing precedent that they take into account someone's background in terms of poverty and difficulty of circumstances in which they ended up doing the crime. And I think there is definitely an argument for that. You know, people that find themselves in terrible corners and then steal something is a bit different to someone stealing to sell on the streets, for example. So, you know, sometimes the background is relevant to how severe a punishment.
I'm sorry, I don't agree with that at all. I don't think that makes any difference whatsoever. A crime is a crime. It's in law.
It's not at the moment. It's not. I'm sorry, Benjamin. At the moment, we live in an environment where you nick something for less than 200 quid and you get away with it.
Yeah, well, actually, this government has dropped that. So good. That won't be the case in a few months' time once the change comes into force.
Well, then how on earth do you respond to Kevin in Barnstable who says, Yvette Cooper is worse than useless, give us some mince pies and tell her it's Christmas?
I don't know what the mince pies reference is. Well, in other words, she'd manage to think it was anything. If you give her a mince pie, then she'll think it's Christmas.
But I don't agree with changing a sentence because of someone's race. Indeed, you know, for example, Indians in this country are the highest earning and highest achieving. So racism, you know, goes in different directions in society. It's not a straightforward line.
Well, I'm going to get your views on another story about race in just a few moments' time here on Talk.
What I found quite shocking was that there was a disproportionate number of men in these camps. Right. There were women and children, and I was a bit shocked to see that as well, because I'm thinking it's not really a place you'd want to bring a child. No. But it was a disproportionate large number of men who were in these camps, right. And a disproportionate number of men, I think, trying to make these crossings.
Trying to make the crossings, yeah. I mean, there's a picture in one of the papers this morning as well of a load of people clambering into a boat, and in the shallows, standing sort of waist deep in the water, is a load of women.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
8:51 is the time. In the studio with me, broadcaster Phil Dave and political commentator Benjamin Butterworth. They've been going head to head, and sometimes with me and just being rude to me, frankly. Anyway, I am aware of the optics of three white blokes talking about whiteness, but I might as well bring up this story, which is a London museum. So the London Museum has urged staff to address the problem of embedded whiteness as part of a diversity drive. When you start to look into the detail, they're asking all sorts of questions, and they're sort of talking about cultural change. They're talking about sort of challenging the way that we sort of have, meritocracies or otherwise. Whiteness is included, whether they can promote a less hierarchical working, whether they encourage everyone to bring their whole selves to work, all this sort of stuff. Is this just wokery nonsense, Phil?
Yes, basically.
Okay.
Look, I mean, do you know what the secret to equality is, and the secret to being all-inclusive is stop causing division. Basically, stop highlighting people's differences. That is the way that as soon as you realise that everyone is human, and if you cut someone, they'll bleed, that's all you need to know. I'm so sick of this nonsense. Could you just imagine if any other place, quite rightly we'd be shocked by this, if someone said about the blackness of something, they'd be horrified, and rightly so. I'm just as horrified that they say the whiteness of somewhere. It's a joke, it's revolting.
I mean, if only it were that simple, if only people weren't,
it is.
If people didn't have racist prejudice or prejudices of other types in the first place, which of course exists. You know, don't tell me that you've never heard any inappropriate comments. I think it seems a little over the top, frankly, and I think it's
that means he agrees with us.
There you go.
And I think it's probably,
I'll take that.
It's probably trying to tick a box rather than solve a problem.
But do you agree with Phil's
point, the idea
point,
that
though?
you should think about it and that you should be aware of it, so that, you know, if a colleague says something inappropriate, you say, actually, I don't think that's great in the workplace, is important. Because let's be honest, if you're, you know, the black person that had heard an inappropriate comment about themselves, or a gay person, would they feel confident to stand up to a boss that said the inappropriate comment? Probably not. So it is something to think about.
Yes, but that's the
But
point
very
about
different to highlighting whiteness. You know, if someone makes an inappropriate comment, I think that we could all agree that if inappropriate comments are inappropriate in a workplace, you shouldn't do it. But this specifically talks about the whiteness of someone. How is it okay that we are allowed to talk about the colour of someone's skin just because they happen to be white? But if the colour of their skin happens to be different from white, that's not okay.
I mean, in the sense that, say, for example, if you're going to do sort of historical references, then inevitably, if you go back in history and you talk about whether it's dramatisations of books, and I know that there are lots of discussions about whether there should be, actors of colour and various things, and say, well, it's not a representation. Well, if somebody's doing a representation today of something that was yesterday, do what you like and put people in from all sorts. It doesn't always have to historically, but if you are telling the history of something, and if the history was predominantly white, if it was predominantly there, then so be it. And I think also, if you have a look at 30 years ago, hierarchies and the way things work were very different, and we worked in very different ways. You can change ways of working without doing this stuff, which I agree with Phil. I think it is very divisive, and I think it's also it in the same way that the male-female debate is very, like, sometimes you will meet people who say, you've been in charge, the patriarchy has been in charge for many years, now it's our turn, as opposed to
Not in this studio.
It doesn't matter who's in charge. You know, anybody can be in charge.
I mean, I'm just saying that, you know, you should think about these issues before they become a problem, and I think that's what the London Museum is trying to do.
Okay.
But is the idea that it should be sort of dominating the workday very useful? Well, I think that's probably a waste of money.
No, but apart from anything, I'm sorry, but, you know, so James, you just said that if historically it was very white. Well, I hate to say this, but the latest census would suggest that actually, currently, this country is still predominantly white. I think it's very easy for us here in London to think in a very London-centric pair of eyes. Yes, the capital is quite diverse, but the broader country itself is very diverse. It's exceptionally diverse. But the broader country is not as diverse as we think.
Which
and as a result of it means that we're not being representative of the country if indeed we have to tick a box on every single occasion.
Meanwhile, let's talk about spending, because you've been very rude about who should pay more tax and showing a deep misunderstanding of either economics or indeed tax. But anyway, how do you deal with the fact that David Lammy has spent over £1 million on private jets in 3 months?
Well,
first of all...
Nonsense. Go on, I'll let you finish.
He has.
No, I'm not disputing the figure, I'm disputing the suggestion as a consequence of the figure, but let you finish.
So my issue with this is twofold. First of all, we are being told, and we are being taxed, and we are being lectured to about green credentials. And there are choices that he could have made that might use more time, but might also be more efficient on, if that's the message. So it's do as we say, not do as we do. And the second point is we're being told that we need to give the government more money because they haven't got enough to do the things they want to do. And yet this is one example of many of waste.
Well, no, I mean, it's just nonsense. OK, first of all, when it's the headline is always in these cases, David Lammy has private jets. First of all, these planes do not carry simply the Foreign Secretary. They carry many people, often journalists, certainly advisors, maybe people from other countries that are doing the diplomatic trips. So it's not one bloke getting a private jet. Secondly, it's not a private jet. It's a government plane which exists for this purpose, and that arguably saves money compared to having to, well, we know it saves money compared to having to hire out an actual private jet, which was the situation in years gone by, which was ridiculous. You know, you're a businessman, James.
Correct.
You write a popular column called Rich People's Problems. Now, rich people...
You know that you're rich, by the way.
Well, not asset rich, but you know...
No, you know that you're rich. That's the whole point of the column.
Rich people, OK, would tell you that...
Phil's rich as well.
That time is money, right? That's why rich people, very rich people, use private jets.
Yeah, sure.
And so when you're managing government time and you have such a huge impact with your time, the idea of flying direct is the logic behind this.
But don't you think this flies in the face, though, of all of their nonsense that they're spouting about trying to get to net zero? How does this work in line with that?
Well, a plane full of government people isn't any different to a plane with half of it commercial passengers, is it?
Well, it is, because it's not available to commercial passengers.
Because here's the other point. I'm sorry, that you are telling people to do one thing yourself. That, for example, we saw Rachel Reeves saying, I'm going to increase. You just said that time is important. So she increased the whole load of tax on private air flight because she decided that was something that she wanted to have a crack at. And they're doing it. They're using it. So in my view, it's do as we say.
She didn't say people can't fly private, did she?
No, she just said, I'm going to be so jealous of you, I'm going to make you spend more money on it.
It's not jealousy, this ridiculous right-wing approach. Private jet usage has gone...
as opposed to the sensible left-wing
Private jet usage has gone through the roof in recent years. So clearly there's some people with a lot of money that can spend a lot of money. And I think when the country's struggling, asking them for a very small amount on each private jet
this whole very small amount is fair enough. What is it? Okay, what is the maximum amount of tax that somebody should pay, Benjamin?
Well, I don't...
on their earnings?
I mean, the top rate of tax is 45%.
It's not, because then you've got national insurance on top of that. So, in effect, should
and then VAT on everything.
And then VAT and everything. So what's the most tax that somebody should pay?
I mean, that's a ridiculous question, because somebody can earn 10 grand or somebody can earn £1 billion in a year.
I said, what's the maximum amount? Okay, so you earn £1 million a year. What's the maximum amount of tax you should pay percentage?
Well, what do you think it is? I don't know where this question is going.
Well, it would be like 55 or 60%, and I think that's high enough. So that means they're paying enough. Philip, what would the top rate of tax be? What's the highest amount of money that somebody should pay, whatever they earn?
In the 10 seconds I've got, I would just suggest that I don't think it's a commodity. I think it's a percentage. I actually basically...
Give me a percentage.
I basically believe that the tax system is far too complicated and it needs to be stripped.
Okay, didn't give a straight answer, none of you. You're financially illiterate. There we go.
Yeah, but I'm not complaining about it.
Benjamin Butterworth, Phil, Dave, thank you both very much indeed. We continue our conversation. If you want to join that conversation, you are most welcome to do so. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
3 minutes past 9. Very good morning to you. It's me, James Max, with you till 10 this Saturday, the 29th of March. Of course, I'm in for David Bull. Wonder where he is this weekend. Could it be Birmingham? Anyway, you're on Talk, and I'm live from the top of the news building here in London. So, in this final hour of Weekend Breakfast this Saturday morning, going to be catching up with Rupert Bell. He's going to be giving us the latest royal news. Showbiz reporter at The Sun, Callum Wells, he joins me to round up the week's big headlines in the world of entertainment, and in just a few moments' time I'm going to be joined by Alan Tolhurst, chief reporter at Politics Home, to look through the top political stories of the day. All this, and you can find out about the Dubai chocolate bars that are flying off the shelves so fast that they're having to be rationed. And also, you'll heard of leaves on the line disrupting your train journey. Well, there's a new excuse in town, and it's bound to ruffle your feathers. But today, after this week's spring statement, Rachel Reeves' plans for the UK is almost as unpopular as Liz Truss's budget. Well, what's she done wrong? You can give me a call on that, 0344 499 1000. Also, if you do have a solution to the small boats crisis, and I'm sorry that we're talking about it again, but with 1,617 people having arrived this week, plus The Sun using its main leader to talk about the only way to stop the boats. I'm not sure necessarily that Alt Mehmet has got it right in terms of the solutions, but you might agree or disagree with those. So if you want to have your say, you can do so. It's 0344 499 1000, and you can have your say. Plus, if you want to tell me whether you have faith in the justice system, with news that we've still got two-tier sentencing, apparently, depending upon your race, your ethnicity, or indeed your background, that could determine how long you're shoved behind bars. All of that and more still to come on Talk. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. Now, I referenced the Sun newspaper, as well one might, talking about, their, I suppose, their sort of main point in terms of, the column that they have. The only way to stop the boats, and then they talk about some aspects. But the question is, with so many people still arriving, one has to ask the question whether or not this is producing the right response. We had the last government saying stop the boats, and they didn't. And then we have the current government talking about breaking the gangs, and they haven't. And then, as a number of you have said in various different communications, you've got Liz Truss, who we talk about in the past, who kind of broke the economy. You've got Rachel Reeves making a mess of things. So it's kind of the last lot were terrible, and the current lot are terrible. And then you've got Yvette Cooper has disappeared off the face of the planet. Well, where's she when you want her? We will stop the boats, easy peasy, says this. We'll do it without leaving the ECHR by simply smashing the gangs and getting rid of the backlog. We'll set up Border Command and give Border Force a caseworkers, numbers, resources they need to do the job. We'll begin the gimmicky Rwanda scheme, etc. This is what Alt Mehmet says, basically saying, you've binned all the stuff that the previous lot have done. You've got your new plans, and that's not going to work either. Is what the open borders principle, what people really want. 0344 499 1000. Do give me a call on that. Meanwhile, let's go to Ken, who's in Kent. Ken, good morning.
Good morning. Back from Asia. Luckily, I missed the earthquake. Terrible out there. Absolutely unbelievable.
Well, the death toll, as you say, it is just horrific. And of course, we'll be getting sort of further news and updating as we can. Rescuers searching for survivors. More than 1,000 have killed in the earthquake across the region. It is, as you say,
anyway,
horrendous.
We could do with an earthquake here to wake us lot up with what's going on in France. We're paying them money to stop the boats, and they're not stopping them. So what we should do, which I keep telling everybody, Article 13, endangerment on the beach. As soon as they get in those boats, that is a breach of the Article 13 that everybody keeps going on about, this agreement we've got. That should entail and they enable us, if we pick them up in the crossing, put them on a boat, give them a hobnob, hot cup of tea, send them back to France. Now, France ain't going to be very happy about it. I know that, and I've heard people calling up talking about, tariffs. That ain't going to work. You've got to get the French's attention here. And the only way you're going to get that is by making the problem, which is their problem, back their problem.
Well, you say it's their problem, but actually their problem is exacerbated by problems elsewhere. So in fact,
well, that's their problem. That's their borders. They deal with their borders. That's nothing to do with us.
Well,
We're not in it anymore.
It is to do with us in the sense that you can either ruin relations. I see your point, and I agree with you to an extent that I think we got to have a different discussion with the French, and we've got to have a different agreement with them. But I think if you just antagonise them unnecessarily, I don't think that will help.
No. Hold on, James. The French tell these boat people when's the best time to cross.
Well, not all of them do. There is an example of that, and I agree, and I think that's wrong. But I think the question is also whether we should be handing over the money and whether it's effective. Ken, thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number to get involved in the conversation. Rachel, listening to the conversation about museums and embedded whiteness. Good morning, says Rachel. Just listening to your conversation on the museum, I've been looking into doing another degree with my local university. However, all first years now must take an EDI awareness module. One of the questions one must answer the model is, how privileged are you? I'm 52. How times have changed. Dave says, James, we're embedded whiteness because we are white and British, just who we are, just as China is embedded with Chinese. Japan is embedded with Japanese. We are what we are. We're indigenous white people. Politicians don't mind people who are ill and on benefits. That's just because it allows them to encourage immigration and gives them an excuse to destroy the indigenous proud population, says Sue. Trevor says, why are my messages not being received? I think they are, but Trevor, I just might not have read them all out because sometimes there's a deluge. I'm very behind. James, the London Museum is racist, and surprise, surprise, the woke police aren't knocking mob-handed on the door. Two-tier Britain, says Neil. Justin in Worcester says, James, the indigenous English people are white. English culture is white. English history is white. This is also true of Europe and the West. Of course, whiteness is embedded. This is just another shallowly concealed on England, Europe and the West, our culture and history. Western culture is the most extraordinary, sophisticated culture the world's ever seen. We should robustly defend it and celebrate it. I agree to an extent, Justin, but I think other cultures and histories, I mean, if you have a look at perhaps what's happened in ancient Greece or ancient Rome and various other things, it's predominantly white, I suppose, but still. And actually, if you have a look at the Chinese dynasties, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Ming dynasty and all that. Globally, white people are in the minority. Soon the UK will be the same as the problem. It is not your behaviour in any way, but white ethnicity, racism in pure form, says Damien. Becky says, my daughter's class at school were told by the English teacher that white people can't experience racism. This coming off the back of the head teacher telling them that you can't call a black person black, but it's okay to call somebody white because it's part of privilege, says Rebecca. Is Africa too impeded with blackness? Says Papa. James, just one for this. 2 earthquakes. Oh, Susan says there were 2 earthquakes in Huddersfield in the 80s and 90s. Very strange to be rocked about. They can happen anywhere. Okay. Vinny says, want to stop the migrants when they get off the boat, give them a tent. Says Vincent. Thank you. When are people going to wake up, says Joel? The boat situation isn't a crisis, it's an agenda. Is it? Oh, I didn't realise that. A far-sighted politician warned this country what would happen. The establishment screamed foul, and the establishment have won, says Paul. I'm not sure I agree with everything that particular politician said, because I think if you actually read the word, some of it is fairly heroic. Some of it, though, fair enough. Stuart says the London Museum is racist. If you change the word whiteness to blackness, everyone will call it racist. Wayne says, I'm disgusted by this whiteness comment. It's gone too far. It's pure anti-white hatred. Does Africa have a blackness problem that needs fixing? It's absolutely vile. Graham says, good morning. If Starmer wants to smash the gangs, there's a simple way to do it. The migrants pay for their passage on the drip, i.e. they pay back the money by working in the black economy. If we were to incarcerate them on arrival and keep them there until their claim was approved or designed, the gangs wouldn't get any money back. So why do we think it's that hard? Graham's very pleased because he's put a bumper sticker, except you put it on your car, you idiot. It's supposed to go in your bumper, not the back car. Take the paint off. Anyway, Kenny from Edinburgh says, "Hi James, I've always suspected it, but I'm watching your show with my brother, and he's not a regular viewer like I am. But he just asked me, is that guy the love child of John Gotti and Maggie Thatcher? What are you talking about, Kenny?" Anyway. Jane says, "I'm trying to catch up with all these messages and I'm only halfway through." If you want to give me a call, by the way, you can do so. 0344 499 1000, and we will come to your calls very shortly. Are Statler and Waldorf now doing your show? I think there was Mark commenting on Benjamin and Philip. Yes, they were. Joanna in Salisbury, good morning, James. Rachel Reeves, I'm done. She's such a moron. She screws disabled people for PIP and at the same time writing an £8 billion cheque for the MOD. Oh no, for Mad Ed. Oh yes, she's done that. If you have real power, you don't need trinkets showing the patients a pretense of power, says Paul. Illegal migrants, first thing we need to do is to make sure that everyone in the country knows of the crisis. Talking of someone from a leafy part, I am not alone. My Hindu neighbours who came here legally feel exactly the same, says Helen. To solve the illegal migrant crisis, says Stuart, simply needs a change in political will. There are so many things that can be done to deter illegals. That's not the problem. The will of the government is the problem. Technical Gremlins is constant on every show. Did the Talk bosses keep their receipt from Poundland when they bought the equipment? Who only knows? I think they did when it came to sorting out their invoices too. Anyway, Rich says, James, the building materials are also up 25% due to higher energy. Decent trade is earning 70 to 100k after 10 years of putting in a decent shift, but they have the 5 years to train properly. All the kids want is 100k tomorrow or PIP. Okay, there we go. Thank you very much indeed, Betty. 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, I will come to our stories about chocolate and birds, but that's all coming up after we turn our attention to the big political stories, which is going to be next on Talk.
Well, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? You mentioned, Russell, the half of the £500 million and that was under Rishi Sunak's government. I think that this agreement was put in place. I remember Rishi Sunak announcing it with great fanfare that France was going to assist the UK in stopping the boats. Well, all the evidence would suggest that's not the case, and if anything, it's gone the other way, that they're just sort of standing aside.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 17 minutes past 9 o'clock. It's me, James Max, with you till 10 on Talk with your Saturday breakfast show. Now, we must turn our attention to the top political stories of the day. Joining me is Alan Tolhurst, he's chief reporter at Politics Home. Alan, very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here. So, look, we've been discussing it a little bit on the show so far. Rachel Reeves seems not to be winning in the old popularity contest. I mean, on one hand, you can say, well, it's not surprising. She had some difficult work to do. But then on the other hand, there's an argument to say she brought quite a lot of this on herself. What would your assessment be?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if you want to become popular in politics, don't go into the Treasury. I think it's a place where you become unpopular with most of your colleagues as well as kind of the public as well. And I think, as you say, some of the things she's brought on herself, obviously the big tax-raising budget in the autumn annoyed a lot of big business that Labour had worked really hard in opposition to try and win over.
Well,
and
they lied.
now, in what sense?
They lied to big business. They said we're on your side, and then the first thing they do is put in a range of taxes that increases the cost of doing business.
Right, and when we're seeing kind of business confidence, which had massive, did go up in the first couple of months after Labour took office, then start to kind of crater after that budget and has continued to do so. And obviously, as we know, next week, those changes start to come in, those rises in national insurance, employer contributions, obviously the increase in minimum wage as well. And so, yeah, I made those decisions in the autumn and then has made some other difficult decisions, obviously, in the spring statement this week on cutting benefits. It is going to make her pretty unpopular. And if you look at those figures in the eye, it suggests that sort of about half people are unhappy, which is just lower than where it was after Liz Truss's mini budget. But I think actually what's more damaging probably for Rachel Reeves in the long term is that those individual policies, so cutting some benefit spending, increasing spending on defence, those are actually individually quite popular. It's the overall set of policies that are unpopular, and that's obviously normally a kind of a death sign for a government because it means essentially that they're just not listening to what you're having to say. They like individual policies, they just don't like you and the way that you're kind of putting those policies across. So I think the government's got a big amount of work to do. We saw them sack their communications chief in Downing Street yesterday. I wonder if actually there's going to be a big kind of push to try and kind of sell some of these policies a bit more to try and lift those polling numbers back up again.
I mean, part of the issue that I think Labour have got is that they said that they were going to do one thing and they seem to be doing another. For example, we've got the whole discussion about two-tier sentencing rules, and I know that Labour are on the right side of this in the sense that, the judges have gone against them. But we are dealing with a situation that they have been accused of two-tier policing. They have been accused of talking about one thing and doing another. They have been accused of telling us to save money and spending a lot themselves. They have been accused of talking about green issues and then not leading by example. And so there is a lot of sort of two-tier. And that is going to stick when it comes to even, for example, Rachel Reeves and others still taking freebies for various things that other people have to pay for. Now, we understand that as a government minister, you're going to have to do things and you might get to go to some nice stuff. But if you just get invited to something that has nothing to do with your job, then I think people are going to raise eyebrows and questions.
Yeah, and especially given that as Chancellor, you get paid a pretty decent salary on top of what is a pretty good salary as an MP. And if you do have to go into a box for security reasons, whatever, I don't see why that shouldn't come out of your own spending if you do want to go. I think on the sentencing thing, you're right. The government is pretty angry with the Sentencing Council, and I thought the response from the Sentencing Council yesterday was pretty extraordinary, saying that they weren't going to change it. Instead, they were going to clarify the language because of a misunderstanding, which effectively is sort of the equivalent of saying, well, I'm sorry if you were offended by what I said. It's not really much of kind of an apology. And I think the government is going to have to, as you say, they want to kind of clear this kind of accusation of two-tier justice. And so I think we are probably going to see, I imagine on Monday, Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, kind of move some emergency legislation to try and change that, because it's pretty clear that Sentencing Council are not going to budge on it. And obviously that's going to lead to further kind of criticism, as you've just been outlining.
Now, when we're talking about policing, that very often we talk about either heavy-handed policing, two-tier policing, or the fact that there seems to be no policing when it comes to nicking stuff out of shops. But police have been accused of heavy-handed and Kafkaesque approach after sending 6 uniformed officers to arrest 2 parents who complained about their school. Now, the 2 parents, both of whom I happen to know, one of them, Maxie Allen, is a producer at Times Radio, our sister radio station. And indeed, Rosalind Levine, they were put in a cell for 8 months and questioned on suspicion of harassment and malicious communications. Now, I'm assuming that we've actually got a little clip that we can play just to put this into context. So perhaps we can do that right now. No, we can't. Okay, all right. Well, we'll have another look at that. And somebody said, somebody got the receipt from Poundland for some of that equipment. Come on, producer Dave, we'll sort it out. Right, okay. Anyway, so they complained about various things. Who knows? It was a he said, she said, WhatsApp group. The school referred the matter, however, to the Hertfordshire Constabulary after complaining about a high volume of emails and that the couple were casting aspersions on social media. To my mind, this is not a police matter. This should be a matter for a process. And the process, as far as I can see it, should be dealing with governors, shouldn't it? I mean, this is ridiculously heavy-handed, isn't it, Alan?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a pretty extraordinary story, and as you say, should perhaps not be a police matter. But the fact is that if the police, if the school referred this to the police and made accusations of, and it was malicious communication and harassment, we understand that the police should be investigating when they are kind of, accusations in this manner. The fact that they sent 6 officers, kind of mob-handed to Maxie and his wife's house, and then, as you say, arrested them, kept them in a cell for, I think it was 8 hours, not 8 months, as you said. That would have been pretty draconian. It's pretty extraordinary. Right.
Now we got the clip there. So that's 6 officers arriving. Now, if they'd sent one officer and said, "Look, can we have a word?"
Right, exactly. Come down to a statement for a conversation. Yeah,
I think that would be heavy-handed, but I think that would be, But to send 6, it's like, what are you doing with your time and indeed your resources? I would fire whoever made this decision.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, that the reason that it's so extraordinary is because there is a widespread perception that you can't really get one officer to attend the scene of a potential crime, let alone 6. And there's a huge problem with things like shoplifting and kind of low-level antisocial behaviour that it feels as though the police is just not able to tackle at the moment. And obviously, as you say, there's 6 officers using the resources and time of all of that to deal with something, as you say, that in the end, 5 weeks later, the police decided, quite rightly, there wasn't a case to answer. So yeah, pretty extraordinary stuff. And I think, as you say, there's going to have to be an investigation into why the resources are allocated in this way. I'm sure if you looked at Hertfordshire Police's clean-up rate on some low-level crimes, be saying, could those officers' time be better spent in dealing with some of those things?
I do find it absolutely extraordinary. I mean, the story also that is discussed a huge amount is boats. And I suppose there's an element of me that says I'm so sick and tired of talking about small boats. We had Rishi Sunak saying stop the boats and he didn't. Yeah. And we've had Keir Starmer saying stop the gangs and smash the gangs and that'll stop the boats, and it hasn't. The numbers are as high as ever. We've got fantastic weather out there and a really nice sort of calm patch. I guess this is going to come back because nothing has been done, and yet it still continues. And my biggest problem with all of this is not that we shouldn't be a compassionate nation and that we don't have a place to play in, is that, first of all, there are plenty of legal routes. And if there aren't legal routes, then there's a reason why there isn't a legal route. And I really dislike the fact that these people are basically jumping the queue and receiving benefits and infrastructure that we can't even give to our own people, as I almost trip over people sleeping rough on my way into the tube, or people who aren't being looked after by the social security system or otherwise. And I'm sorry if people have to suffer, but there isn't enough to go round and you have to make choices.
Yeah, I mean, I think I disagree with you on there aren't a lot of safe legal routes, which is one of the big problems. That one of the big questions is about kind of legal routes for lots of different countries. So I think that's part of the problem. But I think
why should we have a safe route for anybody who fancies being a legal migrant? And some of the excuses that people are able to give to say, oh well, and suddenly they decide that they're gay in order to, and they can't possibly go back to a country where. Well, I'm terribly sorry if that's the case, but we can't deal with every situation that arises in every other country, combined with the fact that, are you telling the truth? And I think there are probably a lot of instances where they're maybe not.
Potentially because I think, because there aren't...
They know how to work the system.
Potentially, and I think what this has showed the last 10 or so years, I suppose, perhaps even longer, is that actually using kind of 3-word slogans like "stop the boats" or "smash the gangs" isn't really sufficient. That actually it's pretty difficult. Everyone who's gone in the Home Office has tried different things, and it's not worked essentially. And people talk about there being sort of simple, easy solutions. If someone's trying to sell you a simple, easy solution to tackling this problem, then they're lying to you, because clearly it's not been because it's not as though there haven't been successive governments that haven't had the will to try and do it. We had a pretty right-wing Tory government that was unable. In fact, the numbers started to go up rather than go down under them. So clearly there are kind of massive issues. I think, again, we've got to look at kind of how we deal with France and how our relationship with the French police and how we tackle people leaving the French shores to come to the UK. But then it's how quickly we can process and how quickly we can do returns agreements to get people who come here to leave again, therefore acting as a deterrent in that sense. And clearly we've, as a government, have not been able to achieve that, which is why people continue to chance their arm and think that this is the best way of getting to the UK and staying here.
I think that's possibly right. Alan Tolhurst, Chief Reporter at Politics Home, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning here on Talk, where next we will be turning our attention to all the royal news, plus taking some more of your calls. So if you want to have your say, 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. We'll be taking more of your calls and trying to deal with some of the messages here. I'm very behind and I can only apologise, but I'll see what I can do to catch up. Meanwhile, we'll be speaking to Rupert Bell. That's next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And it's 9:31. It's me, James Max, with you until 10 here on Talk. Plenty still to come. Going to be turning our attention to the big celebrity stories and showbiz and gossip and everything with Callum Wells, who'll be coming into the studio very shortly. However, now we must turn our attention to the world of royal action. Yeah, Rupert Bell, Talk's royal correspondent, joins me now. Rupert, very good morning to you.
Good morning, James.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So, look, the big talk, and there are plenty of conversations in many of the papers about the King's visit to hospital, part of the sort of cancer treatment, cancelling various different things in events that he was supposed to be attending yesterday, and then indeed popping off for the weekend down to Gloucestershire to his country pile there to perhaps have a little weekend off. How worried should we be about his health?
I think we've always known that because he's been continually having treatment, as he says, he's living with cancer at the moment, and they're just managing his schedule. Look, as it's been referred to, this is a bump in the road, but as he says, he's going to, quoting Churchill, if you're happy for me to use this particular phrase, but he's going to keep on, as he says, to make sure that he's not going to let this cancer treatment stand in the way, because he also feels, yes, that physically, but being out and doing his job makes him feel sort of mentally and spiritually better, because this is what he's here to do. So he's not going to let it, as I say, grind him down. But obviously there was a little bit of a setback post some treatment that he had this week. But as you say, he then was seen yesterday with his window down in his car, heading off to go to Highgrove, where I'm sure it's a lovely sunny day in the Cotswolds, because that's where I'm talking to you from. So I'm sure he will be pottering around in his garden, although...
Have you been invited over, Rupert?
Sorry?
Have you been invited over?
No, unlikely to happen, but it's a bit of a schlep, but I'm in the north part of the Cotswolds, but it's lovely here. But I assume the Queen is going to try and prevent him doing what he loves doing best, which is hedge laying. But so I'm sure a restful weekend, bearing in mind that he's off to Italy shortly for a state visit, which was due to meet the Pope, but I believe due to the Pope's ill health, that might not be happening.
And as you say, there is this sort of discussion, he's off to Highgrove for a few days. They have indicated that the schedule will be sort of back on schedule next week. This is a bump in the road, etc., etc. There is also discussion about whether he's doing too much. That I suppose, we look at the royal family, we saw the Queen, the previous, the late Queen's workload and what she continued to do in her life, but she had done it all her life. Whereas, of course, here is somebody who has been king in waiting and then becomes king at a stage where, frankly, most people would be retiring. Do we perhaps need to expect less of the head of the royal family and maybe encourage others to do more?
Well, the trouble is, it's that the royal family is a bit thin on the ground, and of course, one of the he wants to still do the public-facing engagements, because that is what he's here for. He wants to be seen and meeting the public, and that's why it would have been bitterly disappointing for him that he wasn't in Birmingham. But I see what you're saying. But the trouble is, we've got the Princess of Wales currently still recovering from cancer. It's something that needs managing. And obviously, Prince William has he's pulled in both directions, but they're a bit thin on the ground as a result of the departure of the Duke and Duchess of Montecito. So it does cause them a few problems. So I'm not sure what you can do about it, but they are very mindful that they have to keep the show on the road. And that's why the King is determined to try and go about his business as normal while managing his cancer treatment.
And as you say, that's all ongoing. And just finally to you, Rupert, as we look ahead, I mean, springtime is kind of when we see more royal activity, perhaps. I'm assuming that we're going to see, yes, lots of the King and Queen, but also presumably other senior members of the royal family out and about at various different events.
Absolutely. It's the usual summer garden parties, you name it, Trooping of the Colour, the King's birthday parade. How will Royal Ascot look? So I'm sure the King will want to try and go about his business as regular without interfering, because every royal visit takes a lot of organising, and it's not just sort of thrown together at the start of the week like some of us do our diaries. But in his case, it's months in advance, and a lot of people put a lot of work into these things. So he will be frustrated, but hopefully he's having a lovely time pottering around his garden in a lovely spring day, and hoping that and he'll be back to work next week doing whatever's supposed to be scheduled in the diary.
Well, that's certainly something I'd like to be doing, pottering around the garden. It's time to get those seeds in. I tell you, a lot of work to be doing. There we go, Rupert Bell, Talks royal correspondent. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here. I said I would return to your calls, where we've been talking about various different discussions about boats and I don't know, inherent whiteness and all sorts of things. If you want to join that conversation, it's 0344 499 1000. Claire is in the Wirral. Hello, Claire.
Hello, James. Good
morning,
to speak
Claire.
to you again. Good morning. You're having a good morning.
I think so. So far, so good. I mean,
Yeah.
a few technical glitches, a few miscommunications, a little bit of jealousy on my side that they're all eating scones behind the... Don't ask me.
Oh, never mind. It happens.
But
doesn't
generally,
it?
generally speaking, it's all good.
Great. Well, really, I'm phoning up because I was listening to Alan Tolhurst, was it? Your previous
Oh, yes, that's
guest?
right, yes.
I mean, he said about the Home Office have tried to stop the migrants. No, I'm sorry, they haven't. They're offering inducements. They've even advertised on their, on their Home Office page, come in, we'll give you everything, and the water's lovely. Also, I would like to disagree with what he said about the previous government have tried. No, they haven't really. He said they were a right wing. For some reason, it's right-wing people that want to get rid of the migrants. But actually, the last government wasn't right-wing. That was the problem with it, and that's why they lost the election. They were left-wing, and they weren't really that bothered about stopping the migrants.
So meanwhile, apparently Nigel Farage was outstanding at the Birmingham launch last night. Brilliant oration, identified why Britain is broken and common sense methods to fix it. A real statesman, says Maureen.
Oh, great. Yeah, well, Starmer doesn't want to stop migrants. He wants to displace the indigenous people of our country and make us a subclass. They want these people, coming in to vote and keep them forever in power. Starmer's regime doesn't believe in borders, wants us to be part of Europe, and has a globalist outlook. We're doomed, I'm afraid, James.
Are we doomed? So Benjamin Butterworth has caused an awful lot of incoming that I haven't managed to get to. But he had to go at rich pensioners. Is it about time that we just got rid of all that sort of nonsense?
Well, I don't know. I mean, really, with things like, the payments, the fuel payments and so on, there are a lot of rich pensioners.
But if you're rich, if you are a rich pensioner, then you will be paying income tax if it goes over certain levels. So you'll be paying it in tax like anybody else. And of course, if and when you pop your clogs, suddenly the biggest tax bill of your life comes along. If you dare to leave more than certain amounts, you'll be taxed inheritance tax. So. I mean, people do pay their fair way, don't they, Claire?
Well, yeah, I suppose they do, but there's rich, and there are a lot of people that have been getting, fuel payments. I'm sure even King Charles gets a fuel payment. I think there are very rich, and I think that it has to be sorted according to what people's income is. And, possibly, compared to their savings, I don't know. I mean, that's it's all a bit of a grey area, I think, isn't it?
I suppose it is. Claire, thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000, that's the telephone number. Let's go to Scott, who's in Essex. Scott, hello.
Hello. Just want to basically address saying, I think we need to get those letters in the right order. It's not DEI, it's DIE. It's diversity, inclusion and equity, all used for die white culture die. When has it ever been used to address the underrepresentation or complete lack of representation of white people and white culture in a predominantly white country?
But if you start talking about things in the context of race, whether it be white or black or anything else, and saying, this is a white culture, this is a black culture, or anything else, I wonder whether you are accentuating the problem.
No, because it's actually been, if we want balance, yes. But this country is a white country. This country has a heritage of white history. We have a large profusion of people from around the world who have come here and flourished and made this country a wonderful place. But now we're having people coming into this country who's a case of, you're not allowed to have your culture, you've got to abide with mine. Now, when we did that abroad, we were claimed to be colonialists and really evil, imperialistic people. Yet when it's happening here, we're supposed to celebrate it.
I don't think anybody's saying that you can't have your white culture or the.
What about Easter?
Well, I don't think Easter's been cancelled, has it? I mean, as somebody who's Jewish, I mean, I do Easter to the extent that I eat eggs.
There's a primary school where they're removing the Easter celebration from their calendar. Strangely enough, they're not cancelling anyone else's culture.
Yeah, but then on the other hand, the question is whether, I mean, for example, if you go to France, rightly or wrongly, they've separated state and church. Do you think that, or do you think that, Christianity is so embedded that it needs to stay there?
No. We need to understand the history of this culture. Most of the Christian celebrations actually predate into pagan celebrations that have been co-opted by Christianity.
I mean, I always referred to Christmas as pagan ritual.
Yeah, it's a winter celebration, and Easter is basically the spring celebration.
Yeah, true.
But if we have no problem with the Japanese or the Chinese New Year, Japanese celebrations, African celebrations, any of the other religions. But it's when people turn around and say, this country is too white. That's when you start having a problem.
Well, I don't think. To be fair, I don't think that's what embedded whiteness is different from too white. So embedded whiteness is where cultural differences then, and I'm just trying to argue what they would say as opposed to whether I believe it or not. So embedded whiteness means that you have a very white way of thinking, which means that people who are not white are then discriminated against, and people
going into India are discriminated because they don't think India. People going into Africa don't think Africa.
Yeah, no, very possibly, and I think you make a very strong point. Scott, we must leave it there because we're going to have to turn our attention to our reporter, Showbiz reporter from The Sun. That's Callum Wells. He's going to be joining me live in the studio. That's going to be next. Scott, thank you very much indeed for your call. We'll see if we can squeeze in another call between now and 10. Plus, what do you mean you want it to be you? Then call me, 0344 499 1000. And also, I'll try and get through your messages, which I'm sort of catching up with, but I'm a little bit behind and I can only apologise. Anyway, Callum is next.
Once again, in this case, this is all about carbon capture and storage. So the idea is you siphon off the CO2 in those industrial processes and you liquefy it and you bury it underground. The only problem is, it's been attempted all across the world, including a very high-profile site in Canada, but no one's been able to do this economically. The technology is there, sort of, but it's just so expensive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
9:46 is the time. Time has flown. frankly. Utterly out of control. Meanwhile, at 10 o'clock, you might like to know that we've got all sorts of things coming up with Peter Cardwell. Not only is James Cleverly going to be joining him at 10 o'clock, but also Maxie and Rosalind Allen. They're on the front page of the Times newspaper. They're going to be talking about that Times exclusive about how 6 officers were sent to their home because apparently they'd whinged on a WhatsApp group. I mean, really? It's the most extraordinary story. He'll have the details. Meanwhile, that's coming up at 10. We must turn our attention, however, to the world of showbiz. And joining me live in the studio is Callum, who has come in all the way, Callum, to come and see us. And you are showbiz reporter at The Sun. So thank you very much indeed for joining us, Callum Wells. So, Alison Hammond, she's turned down a big offer for what?
That's right, for Celebrity Big Brother. So you might remember she actually found fame on Big Brother back in, oh gosh, what was the year? Where are my notes? What was the year? 2002, the year I was born. And
for the love of all that's holy, 2002. Oh.
Anyway, James, moving on. That's where she found fame. She's had a very illustrious career, as we all know, especially known for This Morning. And she was asked to return to the show for the Celebrity Big Brother spin-off. That's going to be back on our screens. No, to be a housemate.
Oh
yes.
No, I can see why she would. I could see why she could turn that down.
Well, I was thinking about this story, and this kind of applies to you as well, because you found your place in the broadcasting world on The Apprentice. If you were asked to go back to the Celebrity Apprentice, would you do that, or would you say, I've already done that, I'm not going to do it again, that's in the past? What would you say, James?
I'd think very carefully about it. I think it would be unlikely that I would do it.
Why?
Because I think if you've done something and you've moved on, you don't necessarily want to always hark back to it. Although I think it slightly depends on your experience. I had a great experience on that show. I loved it. I think the format is now a little bit tired, and I'd like a business show or something to be a bit more relevant to today's world.
Well, you get lots of influencer types on there now, don't you? So
well, exactly,
there are so many
which I understand.
For the fame.
Yeah. And I think, I was accused of like, oh, you only want to be on there because you're famous, and it's like difficult me arguing that that's not the case because here I'm on the wireless. But actually, I've always advocated being well known for what I do. So I'm not interested in people, coming up to me and taking selfies and asking, which they do, and that's fine. But that's not the reason why I do it. I do it because I like to be mentally stimulated. And I do lots of things away from this, which are very under the radar. And chairman of whether it's property companies or doing advice for various different companies and all that sort of stuff, which is it's just kind of work.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So that's the story.
Well, that was a long answer. I would be very unlikely to do it.
Okay. Great. Well, back to Alison. She was being interviewed by Gabby Roslin on her magic show, and she was asked about going back on, and she said, it was 23 years ago. I was the second person to be evicted, and I just wouldn't want to. If I'd have won it, I don't think my life would have gone in the same direction. I'm grateful for it, but it's not.
That's a very good point.
I just don't want to do it again.
Yes, you see, she I think that comes down to my first point. I think she had possibly a bad experience with it. She perhaps used it as a springboard.
I suppose so.
And I love Alison Hammond. I think she's very funny. She turned up on, is it Last One Laughing? Is that what the show's called? On, the comedian show, a comedy show on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
Hosted by Jimmy Carr.
I think so.
Last One Laughing, or whatever it's called. Which is absolutely hilarious. Well, she's in the fridge in that. And I'm sorry, but Alison Hammond in the fridge, it's fantastic. And she's done the best celebrity interviews I've ever seen.
I know. I just can't believe she got kicked off so early. I mean, her career's been incredible. She's done all the big shows. I can't believe that she got kicked off so early. How did she manage
she pushed somebody
to build
in.
such a big career?
She's created some of the funniest moments on This Morning when she pushed that poor bloke in when they were doing the weather, when she was jumping. Have you seen that?
Oh,
clip?
Yes, when she was on the water and she jumped over. And that's TV
funny.
Gold, that is, James.
It is.
TV Gold.
I actually think that Alison Hammond and I would present a very good show together.
Do you have any mutual contacts? Could you slide into the DMs, maybe?
Wow.
There must be someone.
That's so millennial. Anyway, or is it Gen Z? Anyway, let's talk about a slightly sadder story. Esther Ranson's daughter talking about the heartbreaking update of her mum. Now, her mum, a TV legend. I grew up watching That's Life. Incredible journalist, consumer journalist, but very funny and entertaining, and actually done some incredible things within society, you know, whether it's Childline and all the other things that she's fought for, and indeed for the assisted dying bill.
That's right. So her daughter was interviewed on Channel 5 News, and she revealed that Esther, her new medication to improve isn't working. So that's, you know, really sad news to hear. And she also said that Dignitas is no longer an option anymore because of her condition. So yeah, hard to believe that it was two years ago now that she found the lump in her armpit and was diagnosed with cancer, with terminal lung cancer. Yeah, that's the update. That's the update we've got.
And it's a very sad decline. Anybody who's going through cancer and you know, dealing with a declining health position, it must be extremely difficult. And I think for her, had she chosen, if you like, not to do that public fight, perhaps she might have been able to go through the Dignitas route. And because, of course, that legislation has not gone through yet, her position won't necessarily be better. But I think she leaves an incredible legacy, and she continues, you know, to fight, and you know, just all love and best wishes to her family for the, you know, incredible way that they've dealt with this.
Exactly. Yes.
Now,
just right, James.
There is a petition. And this is banning Katie Price from doing what?
From buying any more dogs, basically. I mean, she has...
How many dogs has she got?
Oh, God. She's had about 8 that have died in her care, James, over the past few years.
Not acceptable.
No, not acceptable. So now there's this petition. It's got 37,000 signatures trying to ban her from owning any animal at all. She's just showed off her new puppy. It's a Cocker Spaniel called Rookie, and everyone's going, oh God, that dog, you know, that poor dog, what's going to happen to that dog? Over the years, she had a German Shepherd guard dog that was killed after being hit by a vehicle on the A24, and then just 7 months before that, another one of her dogs was killed on the same road. A horse was killed on it too. There was a French bulldog, Rolo, and that suffocated to death after being squashed.
I mean,
there are just so many animals in her care that have died, and it's just like, Katie, you can't keep on getting these animals. It's not fair.
With animals. No, it's not right. I think you're right. I think you're right. Yeah. 37,000 signatures. Well, get it to 100.
Are you going to be one of those, James?
Well, get it to 100,000.
Yes.
Get it to 100,000.
Exactly.
It'll have to be debated in Parliament. Meanwhile, it's another sad... You picked out lots of sad stories today.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I've just come back from New York. I was really sad to come back, so maybe I was just in
what were you doing in New York? Is it for work?
I just went on a trip. No, I did go into the News Corp office there, but I just went on a trip. Yeah, I just went on a holiday, a few nights.
This is the voice and face of the future, right?
Oh, stop it, James.
Anyway.
Yeah, my next story, Paul O'Grady, is that the one you're thinking of?
Yeah, so I think we've got a little bit of a clip, if the technology works. Let's have a little look.
Hello everybody, I'm Paul O'Grady, and I just want to say a massive thank you for reading my book, Eddie Albert and His Amazing Animal Gang, and also for voting for it, and I'm absolutely delighted with my award, so thank you very much. And by the way, this is Eddie, this is my dog, and yeah, aren't you? You're famous. And Butch in the book is based on this little one. Being very quiet today, aren't you, eh? Anyway, once again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Look after yourselves.
And I mean, heartbreaking to sort of commemorate, if you like, the 2 years since he passed. But that was taken just 20 minutes before he died. I mean, extraordinary.
It's incredible to believe. I mean, he seems so cognitive, he's surrounded by his dogs, and that's how we remember him, and he was just as we know him, and it's incredible to think it was only 20 minutes before that heart attack 2 years ago. Yeah,
it certainly is. Now, just before I let you go, Callum, because you are of the youth, there's been an awful lot of viral discussion about certain kinds of chocolate. Have you, or are you aware of the huge online chaos that's been created by, I think it's Dubai-based chocolate?
I have heard about this. Yeah, I know we can get it here. Is it Lindt, the brand that's brought it over?
Well,
I believe it is.
Well,
I haven't tried it.
Yeah, no, they have. And then there's adverts in the papers today of a certain supermarket beginning with L and ending in Idle, where they've done a knockoff of it. And then apparently the new thing after the Dubai-based chocolate, which is a pistachio-like ganache inside your chocolate, is angel hair which is like they're sort of like, it's a little bit like candy floss, but
I
not
don't
quite.
know if I'd quite like that. I don't know if that's
Apparently,
a bit of me.
the youth have been trying
I
it
think I just
and
like
loving
my
it.
normal milk chocolate.
No, and I'm gonna leave you with some news.
Okay, what's the news?
The news is what leaves on the line, because you use the train and thing, and Peter Cardwell, you'll love this. Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Yes. What has been causing disruption, according to Network Rail, more than leaves on the line?
Tell us.
According to the Star newspaper, so it must be true, swans cause the most disruption to rail services, according to Network Rail.
Brilliant.
As a result, train workers have had to be trained on how to remove the sometimes aggressive birds. The news comes after a swan wandered on through a line near Hilston in Hampshire on Thursday, leading to a cancellation of several South Western Railway services. A spokesperson for Network Rail says swans are the most impactful animal for disrupting services.
But they've now been removed from the line. Swan, but not forgotten.
Do we know why leaves cause disruption? Surely the trains can just go right over them.
Well,
maybe I sound really naive in saying that, but you would think, wouldn't you?
You would have thought that that would be the case.
If there's a way for trains to not run in this country, they will find it.
Part of the reason
it will be done.
Callum, is that the trains, particularly this is up an incline, is that the wheels start to spin,
okay,
because it's slippy. But that's apparently it. And Michael Portello will probably give you a better answer than me. Callum Wells, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks,
Sun's
James.
Showbiz reporter. Peter Cardwell is next on Talk, so I dare say you've got plenty to discuss, including James Cleverly and the excitement of speaking to Maxie Allen and Rosalind Levine.
Yeah, huge story today. These parents arrested simply for complaining in a WhatsApp group and writing to the school about their epileptic and disabled daughter. It is an outrageous story. 6 police officers came to their home,
And no
arrested
matter
them.
how many times they wrote. I
Yes.
mean, if your child is, you believe that something, then the school should have a process. You don't call the police.
And it wasn't malicious communication. It wasn't anything other than saying, hold on a second, why we want what's best for our child, and also you're appointing a new head teacher. Is the process correct? These are the kind of letters that schools receive all the time. Well, what did the school do? They called in the police. They were arrested. They were held in a police cell for 11 hours. They were released without charge, and then, on police bail, and then they were told a few weeks later, actually, there's nothing we can charge you with. Arrested in front of the 3-year-old child. Absolutely outrageous. We'll be speaking to